And welcome. You are locked on to the NBA free agency. Nick Angstadt here from the Locked On Mavericks and NBA podcast. We're joined by Jackson Gatlin, Locked On Rockets, John Corrales, Locked On Celtics, Rylan Stiles, Locked On Thunder, Jake Madison, Locked On Pelicans, all the friends in here. We're going to be hanging out all throughout free agency. There's going to be a bunch of stuff happening. We will have the breaking news. We'll have the breaking news going off all the time. We'll have a bunch of fun with it. There'll be a rotating cast of all the Locked On NBA shows. We have a Locked On NBA podcast daily, 5 days a week for every single team in the NBA. So if you're interested in one of these, if you like what one of these guys is saying, go ahead and check out their show. They have a YouTube channel for it as well. Let's start with Jackson Gatlin's semi-big winner today, Jackson Gatlin. Let's start with Kevin Durant because this is the big news right now, is that Kevin Durant has requested a trade. He wants out. No one is a bigger winner in this than the Rockets, but let's start with the Nets angle on this, Jackson Gatlin. What's happening in Brooklyn right now?
An absolute implosion of catastrophic proportions at this point. Look, the Brooklyn Nets had this dream scenario of a big three, right? In James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant. They mortgaged their future, right? Again. A little bit different this time, right? Trading for James Harden in his prime is a little bit different than trading for an aging Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. So
hold on. Is it different? Is it different trading for this James Harden than it was trading for that Paul Pierce?
Hindsight is always 20/20, and I will say the Rockets got away from James Harden seemingly at the exact right moment that he hit his untimely demise as a player. Now, look, hamstring injuries suck. Coming back from a hamstring injury is awful. This is a guy that played through that in the playoffs and just wasn't himself this past season. Still put up 20, 10, and 8, right? These are still absurd numbers. So I think that ultimately the Nets had this idea, right? They wanted to put together the big three. It did not coalesce. It did not work out for a multitude of factors, right? It wasn't just one thing. But now the Rockets are at the receiving end of this, and they are reaping the benefits of what the front office in Houston was clowned for during the initial James Harden trade. A lot of pundits were out there saying, man, this is all the Rockets are getting. They got absolutely fleeced in the James Harden trade. And now Houston looks like absolute geniuses, right? Rafael Stone looks like a genius for constructing this trade the way that he did, extracting maximum value and getting away from James Harden at the time that he did, seemingly, again, right before he hit his decline as a player.
Yeah, but now you got to make good with those picks. Now comes
they've already got
coming from the Celtics guy,
right? Coming from the Celtics guy. You should know, John. These picks are gonna grease the wheels for some productivity here in the next 5 to 10 years for the Houston Rockets. But they already have like a tangible asset from this trade, believe it or not, with the 17th overall pick in this previous draft. Just now, they took Tari Eason at 17. That's already way better than any of the early picks from this deal that people thought they would be. Most people thought these picks would be anywhere from 25 to 30 in the first few years of this deal, and they already got a 17th overall selection from Brooklyn. That's absurd to think about.
Yeah, look, I mean, you're gonna start the thing now with Houston and all of these picks is you're gonna start to slowly get to you can't keep everybody. So this, okay, it's one thing to get all of these ingredients. It's another thing to cook the dinner. Right. So you still got to go. I like
love the metaphor.
Slight chuckle that I got from Nick. A little It was probably the appropriate reaction for that.
As the Mavericks are losing ingredients to cook their dinner right now.
Right. Like you still have to, you have to make sure you get the right picks, because as we saw with the Oklahoma City Thunder, Ryland's on here. If you miss on one, like if you just get bad ping pong luck, that changes. You go from one extreme to maybe not the other, but you go from, hey, you got the fourth pick in a 3-person draft to the second pick in a 3-person draft, and that can change your fortunes pretty quickly.
I want to stick with this metaphor because it's like there's just a random New Yorker in the Mavericks kitchen stealing ingredients. And
it's Alex Wolf and Gavin Shaw. They're just taking all my stuff.
Yeah, I give myself a little Jalen Brunson. Let's see what else we got here. Make ourselves a nice little dinner.
We might as well. We might as well do our first breaking news of the evening. Jalen Brunson intends to sign a 4-year, $110 million deal with the New York Knicks in free agency. Gentlemen, tampering is a thing still, right? Did I not just see 58 draft picks go in the 2022 NBA draft? Like, should I be concerned about this? Should the Knicks be concerned about this at all? Because they hired his dad to come back to the coaching staff. They hired his former agent as the GM, and Jalen Brunson's father is the GM of the New York Knicks. Like, there's no nepotism laws. There's no tampering laws. Like, it's all just fine, and Brunson's just going to go with these sham meetings that Mark Cuban actually didn't show up to and the Heat didn't want to show up to. Like, what should we think about the Knicks and then this whole situation?
I mean, if you're the Knicks and you just happen to have your recruitment pitch meeting and Jalen Brunson's dad just happens to be in the meeting and just overhears everything, you'd be like, oh, who let you in? Hope you don't say anything. Like, that's, I mean, of course, why do you do all of these things to very clearly circumvent the rules? And what can you do? Can you say, well, you're not supposed to hire somebody's father? Like, he is actually a coach. I mean, he is actually somebody that could get hired to do that job. So you can say, hey,
and he coached with Tibbs before. So it's, that part of it is not as big of a deal, but
it's like, it's obvious. I mean, to me, the bigger thing is, like, you went through a lot to sign Jalen Brunson. That's a lot. This is LeBron level hiring relatives. This is like hiring everything, doing all of these things to, like, we got to get Jalen Brunson.
The Wizards did less to try to get Kevin Durant a little while ago. Remember when they hired like his family and like the coaching staff? Like, they did less.
It feels like they went way too hard to pick up Jalen Brunson, who is a good player. Like, everybody likes Jalen Brunson, but man, if he just remains Jalen Brunson, it feels like a bit of an overreach. He's got to turn into Kyle Lowry for this to be like a real, really worth it to me.
Right. They're rolling out the red carpet for a B tier player, which feels kind of strange at the end of the day.
Rylan, is it too much for Jalen Brunson?
I think that for Jalen Brunson, the only thing that concerns me is you've got a very small guard who had the best year of his career in a contract year, who was a bit streaky in the playoffs. I would be scared. I'm always risk averse. I would be scared of this contract, and I'm not quite sure how wide the gap is between him and Tyus Jones. And the gap in pay is going to be very wide, but the gap in performance might not be all that wide.
We'll see. We'll see with Jalen Brunson. Like, I don't know if we've seen his ceiling yet. And I feel like some people are pretending that we have seen his ceiling, because what we just saw in the playoffs was, okay, that's his first taste of, I could be the number one guy. I could be the guy that the ball is in my hands and I'm the one making stuff happen. So it's interesting to me to see, okay, well, now in New York, what benefits is he going to get from having the ball in his hands all the time? But what drawbacks are there going to be with him playing with not only just two left-handed guys in RJ Barrett and Julius Randle, right? Like, that whole thing is going to be really interesting to watch. But the lack of spacing, different coaching, there's all kinds of different ways. And this could go really, really bad for the Knicks really quick, or it could just seem like a solid move, because I don't think it's too much of an overpay. It's just it's just all the other stuff that they did around it, right, John? It's like all the other moves and deals that they made to get this to happen seemed like it was just so much for what Jackson said, like a B level player.
I feel like, I mean, look, Jalen Brunson's 25 years old, so he's, young enough, good enough, coming up, like, the improvement is there. I feel like if the Knicks had just in the, I guess not randomly, but just maybe a little more quietly said, okay, we're targeting these guys, we're looking at Jalen Brunson, for it to be the buildup. It's the buildup. And that's what it always is. It's like building up these expectations to say, okay, we're clearing this space. Oh, we got to move this guy. Oh, we got to move that guy. We're making all of these moves. And you're like, all right, is, hiring the dad and all that. It is all of the extraneous stuff. It is all the extraneous stuff. And it's also because it's the Knicks. Because it's the Knicks, you're like,
yep.
Really? Like, I guess, like, I don't know. If Indiana had done this, would we be clowning them quite as much? Or
I don't know if they hired his dad and then their GM was his former agent and Brunson's agent was the son of the
But it's
Pacers
different if you're a
GM.
small market team like the Pacers, right? Because you're the Knicks. You're supposed to maybe be able to go out there and actually like attract a name without doing all this extra pizzazz, right? So I think maybe that was the point that I think, right, that you were trying to make, John. Like it's a little bit different if it's another team doing that.
You don't know.
I'm asking.
That is the point I was trying to make.
Well, let's just leave the Jalen Brunson stuff with this.
He's doing well. My son's doing well.
Maybe the last time I'll use that drop.
Look, I will say I do actually like the fit Brunson in New York. You get a point guard. You've got your wing in Barrett. You've got your big in Randall. I think there's one when you're trying to put your quote unquote big three or your three main guys together. That positional fit is really part of an important part of the process where
It's just too bad that they all need the ball in their hands at the same time.
Yeah. And then that's going to be the, Thibs challenge or whoever replaces him when he's fired, 2 months into the season, but that's going to be the challenge there. But I do think that there's a way to make that work. I think positional fit, it works. There's at least, I understand going after him in free agency. I get why they're doing it. All the other stuff is just noise and fun, but there's a chance that this works. And New York doesn't care about the money. New York doesn't care about the image because they'll do something else stupid and then we'll move on to that.
What is worth a breaking news drop?
I was just getting ready to ask you that, Nick, because we both see the exact same tweet and I'm trying to figure out if it's breaking news worthy.
Is it breaking news that Kevin Durant is currently in Portland for Mike James's basketball camp?
Oh, let's go live to the scene.
We need to get Mike Richmond on the phone to see if he can drive out to wherever this camp is to see if Kevin Durant's really there.
I have spent
Mike Richmond driving around downtown Portland begging through texts for Kevin Durant's address.
I've spent too many years in the news business. Whenever I hear that music, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I should be doing something.
Suddenly the newsroom PTSD kicks in.
Rylan, you've known of Kevin Durant in the past.
I've heard the guy a time or two.
What are your thoughts on his move, like going to Brooklyn and then now all of a sudden just saying, "Hey, get me out of here. I don't want to play in this city anymore."
I mean, it's just peak player empowerment. This is kind of just the world that you live in now. It's very scary for like a small market team. Not that Brooklyn is, but like even though you're under contract for 4 years, you can just say, "Hey, I want to get out of here." And then the report of like he wants to leave with Kyrie, which is very strange. But I think that Kevin Durant just is a man that has his own ideas in his head and he'll do whatever he wants to do. And in terms of like him moving, I think he has the right to do anything as that caliber of a player to like request a trade or kind of hold a franchise hostage because 29 other teams are going to line up to try to get him. And so whenever you have that kind of power, you might as well use it. It'd be kind of silly not to if you're not 100% comfortable in your environment. And let's face it, at least now Ben Simmons finally gets his own team.
John, Doug Norrie in the Locked On Nets live stream said this deal or this trade request will cause a change in the CBA. You're kind of a capologist, I guess, of sorts. What are your thoughts on just how this changes? Because I think this will have a ripple effect in some of these other things that happens when they approach the CBA again. How can we have a guy that signed an extension that long ago, which is not long, all of a sudden just request this trade all of a sudden?
Yeah, that's going to be, this is like the interesting test case where you just sign a deal, you've got 4 years, and now you're like, yeah, I'm done with it. And I don't know what can change. There's going to be some level of pushback, I think, from some of the owners, but I don't know if it's going to be every owner that's upset with that, because what's going to be the fix? Are you going to could you have a no trade, a virtual no trade clause within the first year of a newly signed extension? I mean, that could be something, but however this works out, I don't think the players union is ever going to agree to something that says we're going to give up some of our power,
that reduces player empowerment,
our agency, because what happens if like take this situation out and say player X signs his extension, and then they fire the coach and they fire the GM, and then he says, well, I don't want to be, I was here for them. I don't want to be here anymore. And now you're forcing the guy to work there for a year. That's never going to fly. I understand that there might be some attempt to codify this out and legislate this out via the CBA. I don't know how they do it though, unless there's a financial, they can say, yeah, sure, but there's going to be a financial hit. But that I just don't see the players ever agreeing to anything that would put that into the CBA.
Bringing in Adam Armbrecht from Locked On Nets with this incredible comment. Nets guy has no tears left in his organism. What's the day been like for you, Adam?
Oh, I don't know. What's worse or more insane than pure chaos, right? We came into this, Doug Norrie and myself, organizing around the idea of some conversations around trying to take a big swing and improve this roster with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and Ben Simmons, maybe some smaller moves. Will they stand pat? All the mechanics you talk about within a normal spectrum of the Brooklyn Nets organization. And then out of completely left field, this was not reported, rumored, or speculated in any way, shape, or form beyond knowing that it had been mentioned. Kevin Durant, potentially, the Nets organization was willing to lose Kevin Durant if things fell apart with Kyrie Irving. But once Kyrie opted in, we thought a pause button had been pushed on that concern. Turns out Kevin Durant has told us otherwise.
Brian Windhorst just floated this on ESPN. He said league executives have discussed the idea of the Lakers trading for both Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving.
How?
Should I do the thing? No, I shouldn't do the thing, right?
I don't know. What's the thing? I missed the thing.
The breaking news.
Oh, yeah. Do that. How do they do it? I don't understand.
I mean, Anthony Davis would have to be in it, right?
You have to give up Anthony Davis, but is that even enough? We got to stop. We got to stop with this Lakers crap. We got to stop just saying, "Ooh, the Lakers are interested." Yeah, the Lakers are interested. Yeah, I'm interested in dating a supermodel. It's not going to happen. Like, come on.
Oh, give yourself more credit, John. Yeah, come on,
I am
John.
a very sexy man, but that's just not going to happen.
You grow that beard back, and it's all going to turn around for you, buddy. I think.
I know that I had to.
I need every single person to clip what Krause just said. I need that as like a TikTok sound right now.
Absolutely.
Don't you find that I will say, like in that idea, because now the new rumor is that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, hey, they still want to play together, just not in Brooklyn. I think that could be a massive red flag for other teams that are like, hey, I would love to have me some Kevin Durant, but I have a.
God damn it, no.
Well, and the thing about all this is how can you trust him? How can you trust him again, like, and give up all the stuff that the Nets are going to want for him to bring him in if he just signed this extension? He's going to try to leave, and he kind of did the same thing with the Warriors, and at least he got them the D'Angelo Russell, package back where they got Wiggins. That turned out well for them, but he didn't do that with the, there's just a lot of, he didn't do that with the Thunder.
You think Kevin will do that for Brooklyn? I think he just set us up nice on his way out the door.
Well, he's got to get traded. I mean, now he has to be traded, right? It's not just he's just going to leave.
What about just saying no? What are the odds of just saying
the Kobe Bryant?
Just
somebody asked that. Yeah.
No. Yeah, I know you're requesting a trade, but no.
Here's the problem. You know what I think the problem with that is? If Kyrie Irving had opted out and left here, and he wasn't a part of this, or they finished and completed a sign and trade in some way, and it was just Kevin Durant, and he said, "Well, now because of this, I want out." I might, if I was Sean Marks, be like, You may want it, but we got you under contract, and we're gonna show you what we can put around you, and maybe you just start playing, and it all works itself out. I don't see how Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving both being on this roster and going, we're not going to do it. Again, this is if it means losing Kevin Durant, we cannot commit to Kyrie Irving, and I think that now Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving would both commit to not being a part of whatever you try to accomplish this year. So it's like,
commit to what?
Commit to not committing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we're going to be very committed to being very non-committal. It's a mess, man. And I think, it's funny. We talk about this all the time around just the personalities of the NBA. I stop myself short of being judgmental around any individual player or what they want or where they want to go or what they want to do. However, there are different personalities around the NBA that I feel like are far more beneficial to have be a part of your franchise. I always go back to the Dame Lillard example, because things have almost never been perfect for Portland. They've never achieved the goals and dreams and aspirations they had. And yet, by and large, and I know there's been speculation around him last couple seasons, but guess what? He stuck it out. And the franchise was like, you know what? We're going to try to figure out how to bring in more stuff here and make this work. You want some of the hard-headedness around a player that just goes, I want to do it here. Even if it doesn't pan out, that can obviously serve to benefit the organization at the very least.
All right, we got a weird one. Did not expect this to be happening today, but according to Adrian Wojnarowski, who tweeted out not only just the tweet, but a graphic as well. Nice graphic work with a gradient, like shadow. Good job, Woj. Memphis Grizzlies forward Jaren Jackson Jr. underwent surgery to repair a stress fracture in his right foot. He's expected to be sidelined for 4 to 6 months.
Brooklyn Nets will take him. Line it up, boys.
No. They can't take him. Lakers are interested. Stop.
Yeah, the Lakers can put together a very attractive package for him, for everybody.
That's a bit of a mess for Memphis, though.
It is kind of a mess. That's just a weird one that I did not expect today. That was a 6 month timeline takes him all the way to like Christmas, right?
Yeah. That's
And
good
that doesn't
addition.
include-
6 plus 6 is
I was
12:30.
doing math really quick live on the show. That was a
quick
terrible idea, Nick.
6 plus
Just
6
get
is
this
12:30.
going.
Wow, that's Christmas
There you
time.
go. Hey.
August, September, November.
Does that change anything that the Grizzlies do today?
No.
Nothing.
No.
It's a
Only
disappointing
Christmas.
blow for the start of their season. You know, maybe they get off to a bit of a slower start without him, but I don't think it's like, catastrophic by any stretch of the imagination. It is just weird news to get on the day of free agency.
I thought maybe you guys would be more interested in that. I guess not. Let's
It
go.
just-
It's super
Their long-term
interesting.
prospects remain the same, right? Like their long-term, everything remains the same. It's just seeing 4 to 6 months to see how he's doing.
Big man
Well,
with foot
the
injuries.
question is, I was going to say, big man with the foot injury is the issue. That's the big issue. Does it change what they do now? Right now, no. But I mean, to be out till Christmas, I mean, it's not even if he's on the low end. That's only the beginning of the season, so he'll miss some time. But I don't think anything right now that costs a month is not much. I mean, they have to overcome it a little bit, but I don't think it's that big of a deal unless that becomes a chronic thing.
Locked On NBA guys, thanks so much for hanging out with us. We have a Locked On show for every single one of your teams. If you're interested in whatever team, we have a show that's 5 days a week. All these people on this screen right now do a show 5 days a week covering their team, including Adam Armbrecht for the Brooklyn Nets. Adam, Phoenix has been the big team that Kevin Durant said he wants to go to Phoenix. Can all of us here together try to put together a package or figure out what's the cost benefit analysis of sending Kevin Durant to the Phoenix Suns?
Yeah, again, this is where the speculation around Ayton to Brooklyn before Kevin Durant wanted out, it was adding him, not replacing one with the other. That would be the baseline. John and I talked about earlier today when we were covering this, the mechanics financially and what a sign and trade represents for Phoenix versus what it represents for the Brooklyn Nets on either side of that. Again, Bridges and Ayton and Johnson, like again, whatever package you want to set as the baseline, then add a ton of draft capital to it. And obviously Booker's not going to be a part of it if you're on the Phoenix side of it. So how do you get to a point where the Nets feel satisfied in their return and where a team like Phoenix doesn't go, do we have enough left here now to still be a team that goes to the Western Conference Finals and goes to the NBA Finals? Because that's ultimately the goal of teams that are going to trade for Kevin Durant. It's getting them over the finish line here or taking a team that feels like they're relatively dominant, back to Golden State, and keeping them at the top of the heap, right? Like that's what the agenda is here. So it's tricky, and why when John and I spoke, I think multiple teams getting involved here is what's going to be a part of this.
Well, and that's the question that I keep coming back to is, okay, well, say you get Kevin Durant, say you're the Suns, and you all these machinations of whatever trade, and you end up with a team that's just Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and like anything, right? Like anybody walking near the Footprint Center, like or whatever they call that arena.
Footprint Center.
Like, how can you not expect yourself to just not turn into the Nets again, right? Like, how can you trust that it will turn out to be different? Oh, it's different. It's going to be different for me now because we have Booker and maybe he's more hungry, and Chris Paul that hasn't done it before. And John, you're shaking your head. You're not a believer.
No, it's the Arrested Development clip with Tobias saying, talking about, everybody always thinks they delude themselves into thinking it's going to work, but it never does. But it could work for us. Like that's the whole thing. No,
it's the risk you take when you try to compile like a group of that, like of players of that caliber. You make a big three like that. You kind of run the risk of having to round out your roster at the margins with vet minimum guys and guys who are just going to barely fill out the edges of the roster. And we've seen a handful of times now how that doesn't always, fortunately or unfortunately at times, pan out. Now I would say that the baseline for a Suns Nets trade feels like it could be Ayton and like Cam Johnson and then picks, and that's going to be better than pretty much any other offer out there, I think. But an important part you have to remember in all of this is DeAndre Ayton has to agree to want to go to Brooklyn as well, right? A sign and trade requires the player to be in agreement to the destination that he's being shipped off to. And after everything we've seen the Brooklyn Nets kind of go through, like, yeah, DeAndre Ayton wants his payday, but at the same time, like, do you want to be shipped off to that location, or would you want to have a bit more agency in where you go if that isn't going to be ultimately with the Phoenix Suns?
Isn't like an Ayton Simmons combination like just the perfect ending for this? Like they feel like they're very similar players.
That would be fun.
Hey, as somebody who covers the Rockets and would like to see those Nets picks convey in the best possible capacity.
Here we go.
No, my bad. Did I say that? I meant as a lifelong Brooklyn Nets fan, they absolutely need to trade for DeAndre Ayton to pair him with Ben Simmons. That is the best possible outcome here.
I threw it to Jackson early in the show, and I was like, let's focus on the Nets side of this. And it took him like 2 sentences to be like, Rafael Stone and the Houston Rockets made like such a great deal in getting these picks from like it didn't take him not 2 sentences to get there.
Can I just say that Rylan is like the Yakuza guy in The Simpsons in the pretzel episode? He's that one guy who's just standing there like this. And when Marge tries to bring Homer inside, he's like, no, that guy hasn't done anything. And when he does, it's going to be good.
Oh, they took Chet. They got Chet over there.
No, I'm just saying, though, Rylan's just sitting here. Like, we're all just, blah, 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 and Rylan's just like biding his time. He's going to like say 2 sentences, and we're going to be like, oh, man, that was good.
He's biding his time like Sam Presti.
That's right. That's right.
But you mentioned it. I want to throw it there, though, too. Go ahead.
Well, I want to throw out a completely different topic of the discussion.
Right.
Is it possible that player agency is killing player agency? Because every time
too much of a good thing,
we're seeing these guys exercise their own agency right there. I want to go here. I want to get this guy. I want to have this control. And we're just seeing it over and over and over again fall apart. Like even LeBron wanted to go to LA. He wants to get Anthony Davis. He wants to get, and then all of a sudden it's not working. Oh, we got to get Russell Westbrook. Boom. And all of these teams are bending over backwards to accommodate everything for these star players, and it's just not working. They're terrible at doing these other jobs. I think one thing that we're starting to figure out is, as much as I'm very pro player, but players are really good at playing. They're terrible GMs. They're terrible at their media jobs. They're terrible at everything besides playing basketball. I think maybe players should just, instead of forcing these teams to capitulate to them, maybe they need to work a little bit more with the teams and stop with this. You got to bring in DeAndre Jordan, and I got to play with this guy, and I got to play with that guy. I'm like, it doesn't make sense. I mean, I know they're your friends, but players come from a different kind of mindset. They think every player has this huge ego that drives them to be this great, but also to think that actual team building doesn't matter for them. So I don't know. I kind of wonder what everybody's take is on that.
Well, what we're seeing right now, like the reason you have a coach, right? Like you could just throw out all the players and they could just run the stuff and it would just be fine, right? Like they could figure out a way to do that on the court. But you have a coach there to try and keep everybody in line, to try and make the decisions that nobody else wants to make. And so now you take that to a front office approach. Like, well, players want to make their own decisions and players want to decide, okay, who gets traded and who gets traded where and who's coming here and all that. And I think that it's the reason why it has to work in conjunction. It has to be players, coaches, and front office. And the players are trying to bypass the front office in some ways. And so it is hurting them, right? Like, because they're hurting these teams and throwing these teams into like ridiculous situations where Adam Armbrecht is just sitting there like, I don't know how we get out. Like, I don't know how we get out of this. Like, this trade shouldn't be pretty good, or else I don't know how we're getting out of the situation.
By the way, though, something that John mentioned in there, it's like some of the worst parts about it are the little fringe things, the DeAndre Jordan money, like those little acquiesces.
Right.
That's actually what kills you, because then you strip an organization from being able to say, hey, we moved heaven and earth to get you. Now we know what your skill set, your talent, everything that's there. Let us surround you with the right pieces. Instead, you go, you know what? Just throw 10 million to my boy. Not a big deal. And once you do that, that literally stunted what the Brooklyn Nets could do for over 2 seasons. And then when Sean Marks turns around, or any GM turns around and manages to get that into an exception, manages to turn it into a talent, manages to find a way to reset that, you're still behind the 8 ball consistently, because you're always chasing your tail on what you wanted to do versus what you had to do and having to navigate that. So it takes a fine line for a superstar talent that both understands how good he is and is willing to trust and rely on an organization to help him along the way. And I get that, right? Like, when an organization fails, then you're disgusted by the fact that you didn't speak up and didn't take more ownership.
Couple of breaking news items as free agency has now officially opened up. We have Devin Booker has signed a 4-year, $214 million Supermax contract extension. Free agent Malik Monk is finalizing a deal with the Sacramento Kings. So Malik Monk leaving the Lakers. John, I'm sorry, we have to talk about the Lakers for another second here. Malik Monk leaving the Lakers and joining the Kings.
Why would anybody do
They
this?
just got rid of Dante DiVincenzo, and now I guess they wanted more scoring in Malik Monk.
I'm just kidding. I'm fine with talking about the Lakers. Let's talk about every team. What I don't want to talk about is how the Lakers are at the forefront of all of these deals when they have no chance of making any of these deals. But yeah, I mean, losing a role player, that's tough.
How many times do I do this? Do I just keep hitting this?
Do it.
Isaiah Hartenstein, 2-year, $16 million deal with the New York Knicks.
Ooh.
Victor Oladipo, 1-year, $11 million deal, return to the Heat. The Isaiah Hartenstein one is really interesting to me because it looked like they were going to re-sign Mitchell Robinson, and now maybe is that not the case for them?
They might be done with. Jeez, wow. There's so much.
I think Robinson's got to probably be on the way out if you're going to bring in Isaiah Hartenstein at that level of commitment.
2 years, $8 million. Now they didn't give Jalen Brunson the full 30. Like, they cleared up $30 million in space or something. And they didn't give him the exact same thing. Here we go. PJ Tucker finalizing a 3-year, $33.2 million fully guaranteed deal with the Philadelphia 76ers. Rylan Stiles, how does this change Philadelphia and their potential title hopes with an in-shape James Harden? You've had James Harden on your team.
Almost every star on my team. But yeah, I think that this really helps Philadelphia, and I'm not too concerned about the length of the contract, because I think that we've seen in the NBA that even if you have this massive deal for an old bad player, you can dump them in places like OKC, or whoever the version of OKC is at the time, and get off of the contract fairly easily as an expiring deal. So it'll hold value in these first 2 years to try to go win a championship, and James Harden is recommitted to go win a championship. And then that last year, if he's not good anymore, you can just go and give him to a rebuilding team and allow them to clear their books and move forward. So I really like this move for Philadelphia.
We're just going on. We're just keep moving with more breaking news. Nikola Jokic, Bradley Beal is signing a 5-year, $252 million extension with the Washington Wizards. Not surprising there. The Jokic deal people think is coming soon. But let's go back to that Malik Monk deal. What are the Kings doing? Anybody?
Being consistent, I think would be the right. I hate to break it, but they don't seem to ever quite figure out what the path is supposed to be for them and how to construct a balanced roster. They're always in the weeds. They're always in the weeds, and it's a shame.
Yeah, and I think that they're just kind of doing the opposite of what OKC is doing. Like, OKC is fine not making the playoffs for 3, 4, 5 years, as long as whenever they do make the playoffs, then they're going to be a team that can sustain success for 8 years like they did last time. And it feels like the Kings are selling out, and for them, a successful year is not competing for a championship or competing in the first round. It's to complete for the play-in tournament. And to me, that's just not a good enough reward. I'd rather my team totally shift and outright tank than just be content with being a play-in team.
It feels like that's kind of the NBA limbo area. Oh, nope, Nick, go ahead. He's got the sounder. Go.
Anthony Simons 4-year, $100 million extension. Why is no one talking about this one in reference to the Jalen Brunson deal?
Yeah, talk about comparative money, right?
And
I want to go ahead.
And Nikola Jokic did sign a huge, massive, what did it end up being? 5-year, $264 million supermax contract, the largest deal in NBA history. Nikola Jokic.
On the other side of the spectrum, a guy that just signs his extension and you don't really hear much about it, right? So the different versions of the NBA still exist. I want to add, is Brunson, is that a game-changing move? I mean, you know him firsthand, Nick. Is that a big deal for the New York Knicks? I feel like the Knicks are still making a little bit of a marginal mistake here in how they're approaching their offseason.
Is Jalen Brunson a game-changing move? To me, it's a solid move, that it's a solid piece that you can start building around, but it's not, he doesn't give you the ceiling of like, you know, an all-star type player, right? He's not going to push your ceiling up. It's like a building block, but I'm not sure that it's like it's part of a foundation of what you can build, but I'm not sure it's like a really nice looking kitchen where you're like, oh dang, that ups the the value and all that kind of stuff.
Are the Mavericks losing more than the Knicks are gaining with Jalen Brunson?
Well, yeah, I think the Mavericks are definitely losing more because they don't have a way to get it back. The Knicks are getting something though. They're getting a good player, and could he become a DeJounte Murray level all-star? Sure. Like, I think that could happen. If his numbers in the playoffs indicate anything, then yeah, he could. Do we want to DeAndre Jordan is going to the Denver Nuggets. Adam Arbrecht, any thoughts on DeAndre Jordan after we just already talked about?
Is this a precursor to a trade for Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving? They've signed their friends.
I mean, I guess so.
Wherever DeAndre goes, man, the superstars will follow. He talk about a game changer. He's a game changer.
If the Knicks can sign Jalen Brunson's dad, the Nuggets can go sign DeAndre Jordan in order to get the stars that they really want.
It's going to be interesting, man. People that win on in the first 4 minutes, right? Like, you base so much of this on the instant reaction, but then when it settles, you start to analyze like what have they really done? Like, what have they really accomplished? That's why I brought up the Knicks about, yeah, you're doing things, but are you going to come out the other side of this kind of relatively being in the same area that you were a year ago?
I think it's really interesting the types of players that are being mentioned here. At 6 o'clock opens up, we're open for business, and it's Bobby Portis. Oh, hit the music. We haven't mentioned this. Hersham Charania, Bobby Portis has agreed to a 4-year, $49 million deal to return to the Milwaukee Bucks.
49, man.
That's money. Portis, Anthony Simons, Malik Monk, PJ Tucker. 6 o'clock opens up, and those are the names that are being thrown around. So what's going to be left after this opening kind of salvo? It's going to be really interesting. There's a lot of money being thrown around. I'm really curious. Now I'm coming at this from a Celtics perspective, a team at the top looking to kind of tinker around the edges. These are the types of deals that are going to New York and wherever. What about these teams that are right there on the cusp that are looking to use taxpayer mid-levels and these traded player exceptions, the role players that they're trying to add, the guys that maybe we're hoping to get $8, $9, $10 million that are now not in that mix and have to settle for 6.3 from a team like the Celtics or somebody else, the Lakers that has a taxpayer mid-level to offer that can't get hard capped. So that I think is what's really interesting here for
it just feels like you have to sift through the top layer, right? Like right now we're getting a ton of different deals where it's somebody like staying or it's extending or things like that. You have to kind of wait for all of the cap space to sort of sift out before like nobody's bidding against anybody that just doesn't have the taxpayer mid-level, right? Like the Mavericks are really hoping they can get somebody like Gary Harris or somebody like that with that taxpayer mid-level, but so are the Celtics and so are like a bunch of other teams. And there's very few teams with that full mid-level. I guess we can do this one. Daniel House is signing a deal to go to the Sixers. So the Sixers are getting PJ Tucker and Daniel House. That's a pretty good deal for them.
That's really interesting because James Harden and Daniel House Jr. had a very legitimate falling out here in Houston. And, you know, the two, I mean, James Harden did not care for Daniel House very much whatsoever after the incident in the Disney bubble that got Daniel House expelled.
Explain that.
He had a COVID tester show up and break the rules and visit his hotel room.
And James Harden was upset about that.
Yeah, well, it got him kicked out of the bubble, and so the Rockets were down a rotation player against the Lakers in a series where they went up 1-0 in the second round of the playoffs, and that Rockets team was very thin, as far as their rotation goes. We should all know by now how tight Mike D'Antoni runs his rotations in the playoffs. He was running guys, 7-man rotation. Everybody was playing 40-plus minutes a night, so to lose one of your 7 guys, you're starting small forward, who at the time, Daniel House was probably playing a career year really at that point. To lose that really, really hurt the Rockets and their chances overall in that series. So that relationship was pretty much soured from that point moving forward. And obviously James Harden wasn't a Rocket for much longer after that, but that's curious to me.
Mo Bamba has reached an agreement with the Orlando Magic for 2 years, $21 million to come back. Mo Bamba, this is really interesting. They just got Paolo, and now they're keeping Mo Bamba. I really thought that he was going to go somewhere else.
That is surprising.
No thoughts on Mo Bamba.
No, I mean it's surprising. He had a decent season, but like I don't know. Mo Bamba doesn't move the needle for me anymore. You got to do more.
It just felt like it was a deal that they could have, it felt like it's just a deal where he comes in and like, hey, he has more potential, and they'll just keep growing as a team together.
By the way, go ahead.
Alex Wolf, Locked On Knicks, jumping in. We were trying to figure out if the Jalen Brunson deal is good or not. Tell us if it's good or not.
Well, truth be told, I clicked on the wrong link. I think I'm supposed to be recording something different right now. But I will briefly say that I think that it is good, and I'll explain more in about 5 to 10 minutes. I'll be right back.
The tease of all teases.
I'm not supposed to be here right now. This is a huge mistake.
There's a joke in there somewhere that the New York Knicks guy made a wrong turn somewhere and found himself where he's not supposed to be.
Well, Adam was just doing an impersonation of KD right there. I'm not supposed to be here right now. This is a huge mistake.
Whoa.
This guy, he already has everything. Jackson Gatlin has nothing left to gain, and some
now
reason,
he just wants your soul.
I know. It's
just throwing salt in the wound.
I'm here
sorry,
for your
man.
picks. Now I want your soul. Come on.
I will say though, not to bring it back to the Nets, but you mentioned before, John, about like these other fringe players. Like Bruce Brown is going to be a great example of that unrestricted free agent. The speculation around what he could be earning on the open market. But if that dries up a little bit, now all of a sudden he may start to look around at championship caliber teams and go be a part of that. And he has a track record of playing with superstars and playing with high level talent. Patty Mills as well opting out. Like the fallout from a team like Brooklyn having this thing, it's not just the stars, it's also all the other pieces that teams may be looking to pick at the carcass, just like Jackson Gatlin's trying to pick at the carcass of my heart.
Free agent Tyus Jones is returning to the Memphis Grizzlies on a 2-year, $30 million deal for Tyus Jones, another player returning. Smart. And solid for them. Just it seems like most players are returning right now. The ones that I have changing teams so far, let me know in the chat if there are any different ones. Jalen Brunson moving to the Knicks, PJ Tucker to the Sixers, Malik Monk to the Kings, Isaiah Hartenstein to the Knicks, and Daniel House to the Sixers. Those are the only players I see changing teams right now.
Yeah,
and eventually Kevin Durant.
Oh God. It's just Adam is just like, man. It's no game changers here. I think it's smart of Memphis to decide to keep Tyus Jones. There was always some question about him leaving. He certainly earned the right to go make some money as a starter, but $15 million per to be a backup is pretty good. It's pretty good. I'm curious to see what Memphis does as far as spending more money, but they've got cap space, so this is a good spot for them.
To the point that we were on before that last wave of breaking news sounders, we were talking about the names that are kind of popping up at the top of free agency right now, right? These are like the pre-negotiated, clearly there was tampering involved deals. That's what we're sifting through right now. Like these were the deals that have probably been in place for like a month, right? We haven't gotten to like the bidding war. That's going to kick in like once this first wave of deals have concluded, right? That's where we're going to start to see those different players start to kind of get squeezed by the market a little bit. I think there's a ton of really good centers on the free agency market this summer. And I think a guy like, you brought up Bruce Brown there for a moment, Adam, but I think a guy like Nick Claxton could potentially get squeezed this summer, right? He's a really talented big man, and maybe any other summer he might be able to walk out there and get himself a full, non-taxpayer MLE. But this summer, with so many enticing, potential like backup or like, pseudo starter level big men, he might get squeezed and might only walk away making, anywhere from $4 to $6 million a year instead of something, closer to the $10 million range. So
really interesting to see if a team out there makes an offer to him. And then again, now because with what Brooklyn's going to be dealing with, they can be more inclined to match anything. Now, there was some speculation that there was already a deal in place for him and he's going to be coming back to Brooklyn. But no matter what happens, Brooklyn's going to be able to be afforded to retain him, match an offer. And then in the worst case scenario over the next season or two, say, hey, as he continues, we think to develop and get better, hopefully the value increases there to your point, Jackson, if there's going to be too many higher profile names out there right now.
I got one right here for you. Breaking news, sources close to free agent Joe Ingles confirmed that he has agreed to a one-year deal with the Milwaukee Bucks.
Oh.
CEO of the house, Renee Ingles, is thrilled for Joe and their family. Joe himself is said to be very bucking with a B, happy. That comes from Renee Ingles, Joe Ingles' wife. She reported the news first.
That's fantastic.
Joe Ingles going to the Bucks.
That ain't bad right there.
And they're keeping Wesley Matthews. What else did the Bucks do? Oh, they kept Bobby Portis. So they're running it back, and they're giving Joe a chance to rehab his injury and then maybe be a shooter. Like that's a move that Milwaukee can make. That's a move that a team like Milwaukee is like, we know who we are. We get Giannis. We've got plenty of time. Come over here, rehab your injury, and then when we need you, we'll just slot you in, and he's another guy that can kind of help out in late season and playoffs. It's a smart move.
Won't have the same burden that he had playing with the Utah Jazz either, right? He just gets to come in and, slowly rehab himself, get back up to speed. And if they found value there in, what is going to be a, pretty team-friendly signing, then, I mean, at the end of the day, that's found money for the Milwaukee Bucks.
Should the Bucks, running it back, just keeping it as they are, should they be the favorite in the East? Or should it still be the Boston Celtics or the Miami Heat? Or because it's not the Brooklyn Nets anymore. Sorry, Brooke.
I mean, I look, as the Celtics guy. I still think Milwaukee is, with Giannis is probably going to go into the season as the favorite. There are going to be plenty of people who will sit there and say they lost in 7 to Boston and they didn't have Chris Middleton. So if you had a full roster, then that might have been a different story, and it very well could have been. You kind of keep the guys that you had, you run it back. You add a guy like Ingles, who, again, no pressure. You wait and you see. Worst case scenario, you're still the Bucks. If Ingles doesn't work out, he just doesn't play. Not the biggest deal in the world. So I'd still say the Bucks are going to be amongst the favorites. A lot of people will consider them the favorites, but we got to see. We got to see what moves. I don't know what Boston at this point. Boston's still quiet, so we'll see what they're able to do with fairly limited tools, but we'll see what they can do. And then it just depends on internal improvement. That's the thing with the Celtics, is that it's all still, there's still plenty up in the air despite their finals run.
Sound the alert, Nick. I can be the first to report. I have successfully reset my Twitter password. Guys, I'm back on. Don't worry about me. We're going to be okay.
Did Twitter just log everybody out?
Good. Yes. Yeah. Everyone universally agreed. I think that's what happened. Good.
Damian Jones has agreed to a 2-year deal with the Los Angeles Lakers. Our former Lakers host, Anthony Irwin, will be very happy about that. He loved Damian Jones for whatever reason. But a center going back. Amir Coffey also going back to the Clippers. And like you said, Wes Matthews going back to the Bucks. Bunch of re-signings. Not a ton of big names have changed teams. It seems like Jalen Brunson is kind of the biggest name that's changed teams. Kevin Durant looming as a player that it was the biggest name to change teams for sure.
I wonder how many teams talk about had trades or things, in place. We talk about 601, all these things go down. Then that happens, and all of a sudden they go, let's just give me a second here before I go committing any dollars anywhere.
Amir Coffey returning to the Clippers. And now we may be, we're about 18 minutes into free agency. We may be done with the big, like wave of guys. Does any one of these stick out to you as, okay, that probably moved the needle a little bit for me?
I think it's just the Jalen Brunson one really is the one that actually stands out the most, because it not only moves the needle for the Knicks out east, it also like reduces what we're going to get out of the Dallas Mavericks out west, right? They take a significant blow. Nick, we talked originally during the framework of the Christian Wood deal to Dallas how beneficial it would be for this Dallas Mavericks team fresh off of a Western Conference Finals run to be able to add a guy like Christian Wood to the roster without losing any of their core rotation pieces, and to be bringing back Tim Hardaway Jr., a really significant piece of that Dallas Mavericks team. To add those two guys and not lose anything else, but you are losing something in Jalen Brunson. So how much of a step forward do the Mavericks actually take, instead of maybe taking like two significant strides forward? Maybe they're just taking like a half step forward when you consider the production of adding Tim Hardaway Jr. and Christian Wood to that team minus Jalen Brunson. So I think those are the two teams that have had the needles moved, both, for the better and for the worse. The
Mavs needle felt like a move forward was made when Jalen Brunson made his step forward, and then like adding Christian Wood was another step forward, and now I feel like they take a step back. So there's, I don't think the Mavericks are better today than they were at the end of the season, but I don't think they're a ton worse necessarily, because they're also getting Tim Hardaway Jr. back from injury, and so there's a lot of other things with that. We're glad Rylan Stiles is still in the building, because breaking news: free agent guard Lou Dort has agreed to a 5-year, $87 million deal to return to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Rylan, you've been talking about Lou Dort getting traded. Now he's on the books for 5 years.
Yeah, now that they've kind of shifted and declined his option, this was the most realistic decision. They weren't going to let him walk after they made him a restricted free agent. So re-signing him, and this was exactly what I said on today's show, $15 to $18 million. It ends up at 17.5, and that's kind of the deal that the Thunder walk away with. He's a elite defender and kind of fits the timeline and everything. He's a great deal, I think, for OKC.
He's going to be in OKC for a while. You're expecting this, or is this seems to be a pretty tradable contract here?
Yeah, 17.5 is not an overpay for what Lou Dort can provide a team, especially as we're going to see him this year in a role I think that will benefit him more. We're going to see him cut down those above the break threes, and so in the corners he's shooting 44%, and so that will increase his overall three-point percentage. And of course, with that going up and his defense that he plays on the other end of the floor, he's a really valuable player in this league. So it's still, an option to trade him, because he's never going to get paid too high of a price if you're only paying him, $17.5 million. $17.5 million per year. But I think that he'll stay in OKC for the majority of this contract, if not all of it.
What do we think about this OKC team? Anybody got any thoughts on them? Are they going to be back with trying to get Victor Wembanyama, or does this team actually have some stuff if they stay healthy and don't just go all in the tank again? I don't know if they can do it 3 years in a row. What do we think about this team?
I don't think they can. I don't think they actually can go in the tank for a third straight year unless you start sitting guys. Like, you've got to actually play these good players, these good young players, right? At some point, they actually have to get out there and produce. So I think they're going to be too good. I don't know if they're going to be, maybe they compete for a play-in spot.
They're allowed to produce for 2/3 of the season, John. And then in that last 1/3, that's when the Presti special gets pulled and guys start getting sat, rested, all of that.
What was the time of the year, Rylan, last year where I told you that, this team may just like mess around and get into the play-in?
Yeah, last year, it's been kind of around that Christmas time mark for both seasons. The Thunder are going to be very fun next year. They're running out of guys who you just look at and say, this is going to be a terrible night. Like last year, they were playing guys literally off the street, like Xavier Simpson, and starting him and playing him literally 48 minutes in a game last year. Like they're running out of roster spots like that. Like roster spot wise, they're over 20 players right now, and they're all players who are at least interesting for the future of the team. So can they just tank? No, it can't be egregious. It can't be a black eye of the sport, losing by 70 plus points again. But that being said, the West is a very tough conference. The Thunder are a very young team. Young teams typically don't win games. And so the Thunder, who, by the way, in this whole tanking stretch has never been a bottom 3 team in the league, they won't be bottom 3, bottom 4, but they also won't come that close to a play-in, I don't believe.
They've never been bottom 3 in the league?
Not in this tanking stretch since Chris Paul trade.
It doesn't seem possible to me.
I think to your point too, it's like, look at the Western Conference, playing games now, the Spurs are going to fall dramatically out of that 10 spot. But the Clippers were the 9th seed, right? And then I guess it's like Portland and the Lakers and what they do, but you're still it wouldn't be a bad season if they still ended up coming up short outside of those play-in opportunities.
We all realize that the way that this is going to play out, right, is that the Spurs finally commit like full scale towards the rebuild, and they're going to walk away with the number 1 overall pick this next season and get Wembanyama, right? That's exactly how this plays out.
David Robinson, Tim Duncan to Kawhi.
Well, they do it.
They're not the Spurs for nothing, right? There's a reason why it works for them.
And they're yeah.
No, I was just gonna say one last thing about OKC, I guess, is that at some point you've got to start getting veteran guys in to mentor and guide these young guys a little bit. Like, they have to find their own way to a degree, but I think there's the player, a good veteran player or two that needs to come in and kind of tie this together to kind of show these guys on the court. Because you can have a guy in the locker room and it's fine, but you got to have a player on the court that can go out there and do it, that can kind of lead these young players and show them what it takes in real time. So I think with all of these picks and some of these young players, and I'll disagree with Dort, with the Lou Dort thing. I think that could be a very tradable player. He's the exact type of player that another team would go for in a trade for a serviceable veteran. I just feel like there's got to be a shift in this mentality for OKC at some point where, okay, we've done our tanking, we've gotten our picks, we've accumulated our guys. Now we're going to start cashing in some of these peripheral players and some of these picks, all of these crazy picks that we've got, and start cashing those in for a team that has something. Hell, I would call Brooklyn and say, hey, let's talk a little bit about not KD. It's not going to be Kyrie, but at some point there's going to be some if it's not Brooklyn, it's somebody else. A team with a veteran that you can say, all right, we're going to bring this guy in, and he's going to help us mold this youth into something that is going to become productive, and then that veteran can go away some point. But I just don't see a team this young being able to just figure it out themselves. You need a little bit more guidance.
Nick, I need the breaking news sounder. Free agent guard Trevelin Queen has agreed to a deal with the Philadelphia 76ers, sources tell.
No, we're done. I'm muting.
No, Daryl Morey is legitimately like adding every player who's ever donned a Houston Rockets jersey and just like creating Philadelphia Rockets. That's what's happening right now. That man was the MVP. He was the MVP of the G League this past season, okay?
The MVP of the G League. Oh, let's go.
Another, you mentioned, John, veterans. Joe Harris becomes obviously a very interesting name on the Brooklyn Nets roster. $18 million, and depending on how the fallout goes here. And the Nets were already in talks around possibly, and Seth Curry, by the way. Want to talk about a guy that is currently on the Nets roster, 31 years old, incredible value for what the cost of the contract is right now. That's a way that, God, I can't believe I'm talking about the Brooklyn Nets as a rebuilding franchise, but that's the way that, you can get some capital there certainly too.
A guy that does want to talk about the Brooklyn Nets as a rebuilding franchise, Locked On Knicks host Alex Wolf. Alex Wolf, let's respond first to the Kevin Durant situation, then we can talk about Jalen Brunson, I guess.
Just what are my thoughts? I mean, it's kind of fun. It's
Alex Wolf coming in hot with the takes here, guys.
Brings me a little bit of joy. Honestly, I want to play it cool. Because Knicks fans for years have been like to Nets fans, like, shut up about the freaking Knicks and just focus on your own team. So I want to be the better man here, but it is really funny. It is really funny, and I can't help but
cordial with the Locked On Knicks podcast. I don't know what's going on here.
I'm always cordial. What are you guys talking about? What is this rep I have around here? But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of just thinking like, what if this had been on the Knicks? What if Kyrie and KD had come to the Knicks, and it would be 1,000 times worse? So I'm enjoying not being the one who has to deal with this. I'm so sorry, Adam, for your loss today.
Now, RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, some picks. What are we talking about just in terms of the package? What are you putting on the table for Kevin Durant?
You can have Julius Randle and the picks they got for number 11.
That's it. Let's do it. We'll do a mini a mini breaking news that Thaddeus Young and Chris Boucher are both going back to the Toronto Raptors. Good for Toronto. All right, Alex Wolf, let's talk about Jalen Brunson. Are you excited now that the deal has been made? He's now officially signing it. The sham meetings never took place. What's your thoughts now that everything's done?
Yeah, it looks like it's 4 for 104, which sounds great to me. Like 26 million annual value. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they structure it. I get the feeling it'll probably be in flux until all the dust settles as far as how they want to structure the deal. If it's going to be ascending or descending, because I think if they just picked up Hartenstein as well, so that deal costs like $8 million. So I think as of right now, without making any other deals, they would probably backload Brunson's contract. But if they clear some more cap space or whatever, execute a sign and trade somewhere or something like that, that could change the Brunson deal. But I'm excited. Nick, better than anybody. He was just the second best player on a Western Conference Finals team. So, if people want to talk about is it too much money? Is it this? Is that? I'm like, he's inside the 50, just inside the 15 highest paid point guards in the NBA. He's just inside or maybe just barely outside the top 50 overall paid players in the NBA, which of course will change, on a rapid basis right now as more guys get big deals. So it's I think he's a good value, and I think it's a good bet, to look at him and say, this is a guy that showed something in this playoffs. After showing something this year, he's gotten better every single year of his career. And
is it worth changing your entire franchise for him? That's the question I think that we all have.
Did they? Did the Knicks?
They cleared all the cap space. They hired his dad.
All right. Well, so the dad thing, first off, he's coached with Tibbs before. They needed to fill some assistant spots because they've lost 2 assistants to head coaching jobs in the last 2 years. So, and they, as far as I know, did not fill those spots with other high ranking assistants. So that's why they signed his dad, I presume.
Just so happened to be the dad of the guy we wanted in free agency. What are you guys talking about?
To be. Were the Timberwolves and the Bulls trying to sign Jalen Brunson too? They hired him at Tibbs' previous stops. This is the 3rd time he's coached with Tibbs. So, I think that, maybe it helped a little bit, but I think that was mostly just something they were probably going to do anyway. Then as far as the rest of it, I don't know. They didn't really do that much to terraform the roster. They traded out of the first round, but got 3 protected picks for the future. I didn't love that move. I would have preferred to maybe stop at the Duran pick and, pick AJ Griffin and just net the 2 extra first, but whatever. That was the decision that they decided to make. The 2nd round pick cost, when you look at the protections on them, was some of them are top 55 protected and stuff. It's okay, you parted with 6 second round picks, but whatever. And you get rid of $30 million of salary. Honestly, Nerlens Noel barely played this year. Kemba Walker obviously played way too much and then sat down the stretch because he was so bad. And then Alec Burks, legitimate loss, but unfortunately a guy that you have to keep away from Tibbs because he'll keep trying to pretend that he's a point guard instead of a wing off the bench. So, I don't think they really terraform the team that much. Now, I think maybe something is coming. There's been some rumblings about maybe Randall being on the block or something. If they trade him, then that's changing the team, but I'll argue for the better at this point.
Who's got a deal for Randall? Where does he go?
I haven't even thought about that.
That's funny.
Well, no, but because that's what I was going to bring up too. Is that it depends on, I guess, what happens with Randall, because that's kind of the thing about bringing in Brunson. I remember going back pre-getting Fournier and those moves that they made, that it seemed like the Knicks, and I only said this as an example of where Brooklyn had slowly built up, everything leading up to what it looks like now a massive mistake, signing Kyrie and Kevin Durant, right? But the process they went through, the Knicks occasionally had tried to leapfrog a step forward beyond that point a little bit sooner.
Hold on, wait, let's go back to that comment. Was it a mistake? I think this is a conversation. Was it a mistake for the Nets to do the KD Kyrie thing after everything now that we know?
Okay.
Is it a mistake?
Yeah.
Chris is saying it's a mistake.
Here's the way it works. You can call it a mistake, and knowing the result, if you could go back in the DeLorean, everyone would do it again. Like that.
But there's a different point. You would go back in the door and it'd say, Kyrie Irving, get the vaccine, my dude. Like that's the point.
Sneaking up behind him with the shot.
Yeah.
He's like,
like KD
It
is
would
just like
it would be like Rocket and Endgame when he
yeah, but none of that. Yeah, I know. But
Ether.
that's all. Like that's the funny thing too about this, just from covering them every single day. Like this past season has become the narrative around Kyrie, and it's not. It's been every single season along the way. Like that's the problem. That's the difference. This was the tipping point, sure, but the personality or the decision making process that Kyrie goes through in his personal life. There were breadcrumbs of that throughout his entire tenure with the Nets, throughout his tenure with the Boston Celtics, throughout his tenure with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and teams still went in on it. Teams still went in on him time after time. And I'm not going to be surprised. By the way, whatever the results are, Kyrie plays on the option and totally balls out because everyone still knows he's an elite talent in the league. Some team next offseason is going to go max contracts. Like no one's going to shy away from doing that. And that's why, even if it was a mistake in hindsight, if you could do it all over, everyone would still do it
except for Chris Manning.
Well, I think look, just quality teaming. I think the mistake is probably going 3 stars and not sticking with 2, because you kind of push all your chips in then, and when you have Harden, when you gave up all this, Jackson's over there just counting up the picks and all the pockets and get out of those picks, but you get the Kyrie, KD, and Harden, and like when that. I think we're almost heading out of the era of 3-star teams. It just seems like this is maybe the last grasp of it because there's so little wiggle room you get at that level now. It's just really hard to build at that level. And I almost wonder if it's KD plus one of those guys and you keep some of the depth you don't have to trade Jared Allen, for instance, or Karis LeVert or whatever.
The only one out of that group is Jared Allen. That's the only mistake that gets made in that process as far as it goes. Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, none of that matters.
You just have a little more money then is the other thing. It's like you just have a little more flexibility where you're not tied into 3 guys specifically. And that's just such a hard it's just such a hard path to walk with the 3 guys. Like the Cavs had to do it, the Warriors obviously did it, but it's just the Thunder did it. It's just very hard to walk that 3-star path now, I think.
Hindsight is totally 2020, but I think too it's the timing of it all, right? If they had been able to acquire James Harden maybe earlier that summer, right, rather than 9 games into the season, you have a little bit more time to round out the roster around those guys, maybe make sure things are a little bit more whole before really trying to hit the ground running with 3 superstars and seeing how it works, how they coalesce together on the court, all that stuff, rather than having James Harden throwing his hissy fit in Houston, pouting his way out of town, like all of that. And you actually have like a stronger foundation to try and start with that trio. Make sure you put the right guys, the right role players around them to round out the rest of that roster, rather than slapdash try to throw it together in the midst of a season and then have all these other problems that creep up along the way. I think maybe I don't want to say it was doomed from the start, but it definitely wasn't a pretty start to that pairing, I guess.
Yeah. And by the way, I agree with Chris. I think a lot of people have talked about this now. That version of how you build towards a championship is clearly shifted. It's clearly changed. And it's like, I don't know, it's not a woe is me, but how many things had to go wrong for the Brooklyn Nets in all of these versions of adding in? Everything went wrong, every possible thing. In that very minute sample size of all 3 of those players on the court together, it was historically great, right? So there's also the parallel universe where Kevin Durant doesn't have the injury this past season. That played a massive factor in all of this as well, where, again, the once in a generation pandemic that hit that altered how when Kyrie
forgot
was
about that.
right, there's all of these things. There was a season this past season, the Brooklyn Nets could have won the championship this past season legitimately, right? But it didn't happen that way. And so now that the sample size is how disastrous. I mean, listen, could they have been in a position to compete for it? Let's put it that way, right? They would have been 2 years ago. We all know the shot and the line and Kevin Durant's foot from beating the Bucks and moving on to the playoffs. But the point just, and think about that, right? How far have the Brooklyn Nets come from that moment? I got
it real quick. The Brooklyn Nets, according to their Twitter account, have announced the Royce O'Neal trade. They made it official? They have made it official. Welcome, Royce O'Neal. Talk me through the Royce O'Neal trade still happening, even though Kevin Durant is not going to be on the team anymore.
So, by the way, because Doug Norrie, co-host,
he's the new franchise cornerstone, is what's happening.
He goes
build around Royce.
This was the perfect. Doug goes this is how the organization had no clue what Kevin Durant was intending to do, because why would you be trading your next year's 2023 first round pick for Royce O'Neal unless you thought it was his piece around? And I said, sure, but we don't know it hasn't gone through officially, right? That can get pulled back now that you hear this information. unless you formally announce it on Twitter that you are in fact going to retain him. Listen, I think it's like $9 million this year and $9 million the following year. It's weird and it doesn't. Who knows? Whatever. I don't.
What is the logic? No, what is the logic around that deal, Adam? Like, do you think this was like something that they were agreed upon, like a trade that was
they did it too
formulated
early.
before?
They had to.
Yes. Yeah. Because the thinking was, again, okay, Kyrie Irving opted in for the 1 year. You think we have an opportunity here to convince mainly Kevin Durant that, hey, this thing can be successful short and long term here. So you start to look around and try to figure out, we have trade exemptions. We have ways to make this happen. How do we surround some veteran talent and key pieces here? So you have to start to make those moves. Otherwise, as we say, everyone's talking because moves get put in place and you don't get a bite at the apple. Now, then Kevin Durant comes out of nowhere and you're left to deal with this component of it. You can't stand pat, right? You can't not prepare for Kevin Durant to be there. So you end up locked into Royce O'Neal, the new franchise cornerstone piece.
I want to throw this one to Wes Goldberg. He just jumped in, Locked On Heat, Locked On NBA. Knowing what you know now, was getting Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and all that and everything the Nets just went through, was it worth it?
For who?
Would you do it again?
Would I do it again if you're Brooklyn? Yeah, you probably do it again. I mean, this is probably like out of the 10 alternate universes where this takes place, this is the worst one for Brooklyn, probably, right? But you know, I remember the reporting back when they were trying to sign Kevin Durant. Like Kevin Durant was always the whale for them, right? It was sort of like Kyrie Irving was the tax that came with Kevin Durant. There was actual like being reported debate about whether or not they should even go after Kevin Durant, knowing that it probably comes with Kyrie Irving attached to it because they know all the things that come with Kyrie Irving and their worst fears were realized, right? And this is just sort of what happens. That said, I guess it depends on the haul that they get back. They're probably not going to get a whole lot of stuff back for Kyrie Irving, but if you can get like an Anthony Davis style return for Kevin Durant, your franchise is still sort of in a better spot than it was before. Everybody sort of, I think, romanticizes like the Spencer Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert era Brooklyn Nets as if they were doing like real things that mattered.
Jared Allen erasure by Wes Goldberg. Unbelievable.
Like, but again, Jared Allen wasn't even fully Jared Allen yet. Like he wasn't fully Jared Allen that we know him in Cleveland now either, just to be.
It's just always way more fun to root for the team that's like the up and coming, like even this Dallas Mavericks team last year.
Right.
Like
how many I forget how many championships did they win? Was it like 3? Was it 2, 3? I forgot how many like Spencer Dinwiddie won. I don't remember.
One, not 2.
Yeah. But so who cares? Like that team was fun, but who cares about it? And now you're gonna have a bunch of draft picks.
Wasn't he also like a big crypto guy? And that hasn't gone well either. So you know maybe they were onto something there.
Can they just get like a normal regular point guard?
Spencer Dinwiddie, affectionately referred to during his time in Brooklyn as the entrepreneur, Spencer Dinwiddie.
Man, troubling.
Is it enough to just make millions of dollars as an NBA player? Like now you have to be /entrepreneur.
Oh, you got to tell your own story, and you got to go out there.
That's true. Yeah, new media.
You got to invest. You got to get paid in crypto.
New
and
media.
Lose like 2/3.
Hey, hold on. Do we know what new media is? Is this new media?
We are new media. I've actually been thinking about this quite a bit. We're new media. As long as you're not Skip Bayless, you're new media.
Like we're not. Except for some of our episodes go on TV now because of our Technic connection. Are we new media?
But some of the new media will look strikingly like old media. That's the best part about new media.
Are we making NFTs of this? Because otherwise, I don't think we're new media.
Yeah, I'm out. I'm punting on the NFT thing. I'm good.
I'm very fungible.
I had to give Adam a new title. He is now Locked On Net /entrepreneur.
Anybody left? What do you hope your team does? Let's start. I guess let's start with the Cavs. Chris Manning, what do you want to see your team do? Are they going to do anything?
Well, so the Colin Sexton thing is the big thing here, right? Like whatever happens there, is going to shape their summer. I think Darius Garland's probably getting the max extension, and I think it just depends on if the last year's an option or not, and how fast that gets done. There's maybe some trades to be made. They have this Karis LeVert expiring and some stuff, but like the Colin Sexton thing is the thing. And I think at the draft, one of the under the radar storylines is that his market kind of got really carved up. I mean, the Pistons took Jaden Ivey. They don't need Colin Sexton anymore. There's a lot of other teams that like theoretically have interest. Like I was texting with Tony East because the Pacers are for some reason the betting favorites to get Colin Sexton. And he's like, I just do not understand that. Like, it doesn't really make sense to me. I don't see what his market is, but I also look at Fernie Simons getting $100 million. And I'm like, yes, Colin's coming out of injury, but like, you can't argue to me based on current production that he necessarily isn't in that range and he should be asking for that. But I don't think he's going to get that. And like, what is that? What is he happy with? What is Clutch going to be happy with? And are the Cavs looking to try to move him for something else? It's the big unknown of their offseason, I think. And I asked hosts in our network, I got one nibble about like who might be interested, and that was from Gavin Shaw of Locked On Knicks. So I don't know. You guys tell me what makes sense to do with Colin Sexton.
Well, it's because it's the only team with cap space. Like, who even has cap space left? It's just the Pistons, right? Pacers?
Yeah.
Spurs.
I think.
Yeah, the Spurs,
I guess.
Did the Pistons use all of their cap space acquiring the Knicks garbage?
Almost all of it.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
I just don't think the Cavs are bidding against anybody at this point for Colin Sexton.
No, and does that drag this out? Do they like do they get aggressive and try to facilitate for something for a wing that I think they might need? It's it's tricky.
I was about to throw out, again, it's like, do the Cleveland Cavaliers have an interest in adding Joe Harris to their arsenal of perimeter shooting?
Bringing back
Bringing
Joe
him back.
Harris, mind you, because he was bad
That's right.
when the Cavs took him out of UVA.
You didn't know how to develop him. That's okay.
Karis LeVert for Joe Harris.
Karis LeVert for Joe Harris. Stop it. Knock it off. Come on, man. I'm down the ground over here.
Karis LeVert and Jetty Osman.
He's been through enough today.
Throw in Jetty Osman too. How about
throw
that?
him in. I'm gonna throw him in.
2 expiring contracts. Like, you can save some money. Josiah gets to clean his cap. Like, I'm just saying,
Is
it's
Karis
to your point.
LeVert is Karis LeVert at like 28 years old still considered a developing young asset, or is he finally
He's gonna get there
past that?
if he just couple little tweaks to his game, and he's gonna get there for us.
The Cavs also claim he's a local product, despite that he's from like 2 hours away in Columbus. Like, that's a very different part of the state with a very different vibe. Like,
As someone that has lived in Ohio, every part of Ohio is like a local, like,
yeah,
it feels like.
like, come on, guys, you're trying too hard here.
Guys, we have the list of the $200 million plus contracts signed in NBA history. Steph Curry did it twice. Giannis, Luka, Trae Young, Westbrook, Rudy Gobert, Bradley Beal, Jokic, and now Devin Booker. Do any of those stand out to you?
Wait, say that list again.
The $200 million plus contracts in NBA history. The only ones. Curry did it twice. Giannis, Luka, Trae Young, Westbrook, Gobert, Bradley Beal, Jokic, and Devin Booker.
The fact that Steph did it twice.
Beal stands out to me.
That Steph has done it
Steph
twice.
got the very first one, didn't he?
Yes.
When those first came around? Okay. That's why he's got it twice.
Who's the worst player on that list?
Beal.
Beal?
Beal's the
Russell
only one's
Westbrook.
never accomplished anything.
Well, is it current West? I mean, it's current Westbrook is the worst one, right?
Yeah.
Westbrook, this version of Westbrook, but like when he first signed it,
He was still
It
kind
was
of
right off the MVP campaign, or like 1 year after that, or something.
Yeah.
It was during the PG time. That everything was great back then.
is Beal I know that like everybody wants Bradley Beal, but does anybody want Bradley Beal now on that contract?
I mean, he's going to be making $57 million in the 5th year.
Yeah,
How do you trade for that now?
that's a lot of money for a guy who hasn't done a whole lot of stuff.
What are the chances he ends up like John Wall, just getting passed around to various teams late in his career?
But I think
John
John
Wall's
Wall's
situation
situation
is
is super weird because of the injury stuff, right? I mean, at the end of the day, like, one, the Clippers are going to realize very quickly John Wall is not washed. Like, he has a lot of game left. You don't want that level of game for a $47 million price tag. Similar situation with Beal, not, injury related, but Beal can produce, right? He can be probably the second or third best player on a contending team, but he's getting paid like a premier tier 1 guy. And that's the issue with the way the NBA is geared with this current CBA and how you have to pay guys at the top end of the talent pool to retain their services. He's just not worth all that money at the end of the day, but you got to pay him to be able to keep him.
According to Jake Fisher, sounds like Danilo Gallinari would be deciding between the Chicago Bulls and the Boston Celtics. John Krause, any interest in Danilo Gallinari?
Yes, but
That was enthusiastic.
No, it's not my first choice. It's not my first choice. The Bulls.
What is your first choice for the Celtics?
It's because Dennis Schroeder is his first choice. That's why.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's
Run it back.
So my first choice was actually Kentavious Caldwell Pope, but he ended up getting traded. But wing, versatile defender. Gallo, like, I'm looking at the numbers here. First of all, an Italian reporter, Davide Cinelato, reported that the Wolves would be offering him $10 million, the full mid-level. Now, Jake Fisher is saying that Chicago is offering roughly $8 million. So that's a portion of their full mid-level.
Yeah.
The Celtics only have the taxpayer mid-level, which is 6.4-ish million dollars. If he wants to take the 6.4, then okay, that's fine. I think the Celtics have other ways to add to their team. But I think that just puts a little pressure on the $17 million traded player exception that they have from the Evan Fournier deal, that they need to go out there and get that versatile wing. They need scoring off the bench, but they have said from the beginning, we don't want to disrupt the identity of this team, which is defense and versatility. That's not what Gallinari is. However, he is a scorer and he is a shooter, and you can put him in there. He's got some size, so he certainly can help. But my hesitancy is with the lack of tools that the Celtics have. That puts just a lot more pressure on each one of these moves because you kind of got to get them right. I'm not 100% sure that Gallo is right, but we'll have to see it. It's very much going to be impacted by what else Boston does.
We've got some breaking news. Marvin Bagley III has agreed to an agreement with the Detroit Pistons. 3 years, $37 million for Marvin Bagley.
What?
That is absurd.
That's a lot of money for him. Good for him.
I mean, the
Good for
Pistons,
him.
we were talking about where are the Pistons going to spend their money, and hey, they just gave it to Marvin Bagley.
Joe Ingles was previously like I'm happy he got that much money, like king for this free agency, because he got like 6-something million coming off a torn ACL. Like that's great for him. Marvin Bagley, I think, is now my number one for $37 million. I think that's great.
Good job for getting the money.
Good for him. PJ Tucker also good for him. 33 years guaranteed at 37 years old. That's great work if you can get it.
Wes Goldberg, is that too much of a deal for PJ Tucker?
Look, this is, if you're the Sixers and you think you're just a couple of pieces away from contending for the finals, this is what you do, right? Is you kind of overpay for that guy if you think he's a perfect fit, and PJ Tucker is a perfect fit. He's got a relationship with one of some of the most important people in the organization. He could, conceivably space the floor next to Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid said in press conferences, "Boy, we could really use a guy like PJ Tucker." So they just went out and got PJ Tucker. So it
too much
makes
player
sense.
agency.
But I understand that if you're Miami, that you probably didn't want to throw that at him. Meanwhile, Gallinari was a guy that was probably going to be on Miami's radar, but I don't think that they were interested in him. Obviously, they weren't going to give the full mid-level exception to Gallinari if they weren't going to give it to PJ Tucker. They're trying to stay away from that hard cap, which is why they weren't able to offer PJ Tucker that full MLE. But if Gallo was like somewhere in the minimum range, that would have been something. But right now, Miami has 0 power forwards, unless you consider the rookie Nikola Jovic a power forward, which I don't think you could consider him a rotation-ready guy right now anyway. So
I don't know if you put power before anything ahead of Nikola Jovic.
Correct. So, they're sitting here right now with 0 power forwards on the roster. Obviously, the PJ Tucker deal is done. Looks like Gallo is going elsewhere. It's going to be Thaddeus Young already signed. Like a bunch of names that they had been looking at potentially look to be going somewhere else. So it'll be interesting to see where Miami goes from here. Maybe Kevin Durant? I don't know.
Could be. What's the conversation happening in Miami about Kevin Durant right now? He wants to go to the Suns, but he's also mentioned the Heat as another. And the Heat are just getting mentioned with everybody all the time. At any moment.
Yeah. Jalen Brunson trying to use Miami as leverage, and then them coming out this morning and be like, "What do you know?"
Pat Riley was like, "No,
no."
I don't even think it was. If I may, I don't even think it was leverage. I think it was literally like Jalen doing a favor to Leon Rose and the Knicks front office being like, let's avoid these tampering charges.
That's probably what it was.
Say that Miami's
it was brushing the footprints like behind you, like as you walk to the next destination.
Right. And Miami's like, no, if we got hit for tampering for Kyle Lowry, you're getting hit for tampering, New York Knicks. Like, this is what's gonna happen.
I said actually I had a fun theory on our pod last night, and then I'll throw it to you. That because Jalen grew up with his dad being on the Knicks during the 90s when the Heat and the Knicks hated each other, that this was like a last like screw you to the Heat for like the Brunson family to be great. Like, let's do like a fake meeting with them and we'll make Pat Riley pull out all the stops for us and then like just say no.
Pat Riley saw right through it like immediately. He was just like,
he definitely did. He probably faxed Jalen a message saying I won't be taking your meeting today.
No, it had many more.
You're not
expletives
a
in it
top
than that.
15 point guard. No, thank you.
It was just a picture of his middle finger, is what it was, with a ring on it.
With all the
it
rings
was
on it.
all of the rings on.
It was Adrian Brody's middle finger from the winning time series.
But in regards to the Kevin Durant stuff, yeah, I don't know. I think every Heat fan is slightly hopeful that something can happen, because like, why wouldn't you? It's Kevin Durant. But I don't know what the trade package is, man. Like, you can't trade Bam Adebayo to Brooklyn because of the weird CBA rule that everybody's heard of at this point. Maybe you could get a third team involved. I don't know what the third team is. I think Bam Adebayo is a great player. I think there's plenty of teams that would want him, but like, what are you getting back that then you're sending to Brooklyn? I don't know. It would be very complicated. If anybody could pull off a super complicated trade, it's Pat Riley. That seems to be the thing that he likes to do. I actually don't know if Pat Riley's ever made a trade with just two teams involved at this point. So
He's unaware that you can do just a 2-team.
Somebody
has to
don't
be.
tell him. Just don't tell him. That's still out there as a possibility, but maybe it's not Phoenix, maybe it's not Miami. I don't know where Kevin Durant. And the interesting thing is, like, Brooklyn wants something and Kevin Durant wants something. Like, Kevin Durant wants to remain competitive wherever he goes, and Brooklyn wants to remain competitive without Kevin Durant. And that's a really tough walk, right? Like, I don't know how you trade Kevin Durant into a team that's still competitive, get enough stuff back where now if you're Brooklyn, you're still competitive, but you don't completely disrupt what's going on with the new Kevin Durant team.
So there's actually a hypothetical. Oh, well, do you have an announcement?
I got one. I got a weird one, and I'm glad that Adam's still in here for this.
Oh, good.
Patty Mills has agreed to a deal, 2 years, $14.5 million, to come back to the Brooklyn Nets. Did Patty Mills not get the
Okay,
he didn't get the memo all the way in Australia or wherever he is right now. Why is Patty Mills coming back to the Nets?
Good place to live.
Well, I guess he was on the player. He had the last year of his player option that was like a little north of, I think, 6.2, 6.4 million. So, I mean, he gets himself a little bit of extra money, obviously, and an extra year put on it. We thought with the opt out and then the news breaking that it would be, hey, I'll go with a competitive team. Now, theoretically, he had his time with the San Antonio Spurs. There's a connection there with Sean Marks. We're all talking about veteran players to help a young core and help teach young guys how to play the game right. Well, Patty Mills is that guy, and you still have Cam Thomas there, obviously, as well.
I think it's a smart deal. I think it's a smart thing to do. First of all, you give Patty Mills his money. That's a nice thing to do. A couple of Australians working together to get that done. But I think it's smart to get Patty the most money. This is the most money he's going to get. And you tell him, say, hey, we're going to give you the most money you can get, and now we're going to trade you. Now
This is the Sam Presti
for him moving. Like, this is a smart thing to do for Brooklyn when you're team building and you're doing it a different way. You have to say, okay, now you've got a $7 million stackable salary to move out. So I think this is
and in the meantime, if you're looking to retain guys and acquire guys who are good locker room presences, you're trying to rebuild the culture around that team. There's all the reporting around Brooklyn right now. Patty Mills is that guy, right? So he's a locker room leader. He can come in, kind of re-solidify that culture that's eroded.
So you keep him and he does that, or you trade him. Either way, it works.
Yeah.
All right, got a little one. Jackson Gatlin's still in here. The Houston Rockets restricted free agent Jae'Sean Tate agreed to a 3-year, $22 million deal. What are the thoughts on Jae'Sean Tate returning for 3 years, $22 million?
That's great value for Houston. I kind of projected that he was going to get somewhere a little bit further north of that. I thought maybe in the 8 to 10 range, which might have been a slight overpay for him, given the fact that he brings a lot to the table, both offensively, defensively, but he just doesn't have a consistent outside shot yet. Shot just over 30% from 3 on the season. That's been the one crux for him as a player in his 2 years in the league, but he gives you so much elsewhere on the floor that he's still a productive member of the team. Getting him for just over $7 million a year is a huge steal, and there's a reason. They had him on a team-friendly deal. They could have just picked up his team option, had him on a really team-friendly deal, and revisited this discussion next offseason, but the reporting around the team is that they wanted to go ahead and, iron out a deal this offseason, get him on a team-friendly contract this offseason, rather than have to revisit that next year and potentially pay, even more top dollar to retain his services if he, again, fixes that three-point shot, has a breakout year kind of in that final year of his contract, and then letting him walk into unrestricted free agency this upcoming offseason. So I love the deal for Houston.
And we're learning with the Jalen Brunson and others, if you can extend a guy's deal that you think could have a higher upside, you extend that deal when you can. You don't mess around with it. You don't like try to put him in trades at the lower offer. Like you extend. You can always trade later. You extend.
It was an interesting little run of teams declining options this year. I haven't seen this happen a lot. Declining future options to get them into restricted free agency a little sooner, and then negotiating longer term deals off of their kind of a little more promise and a little less, I think, actual on court delivery. Like you're talking about guys who could bet on themselves a little bit, but they're not quite in that upper tier of betting on themselves. So these are younger guys that are like, hey, you know what? I'm going to take the guaranteed money. I know I'm going to get 10 million, 15 million, whatever that is, really good money. And then we'll deal with it later on when you really start to enter your prime. But this is a good run by smart GMs around the league to enter into restricted free agency just a tiny bit earlier and lock up important guys at a little bit of a lower price point to give themselves some more flexibility moving forward. Good point, John.
Clip that one.
John, two classics tonight. Oh man. What
Can I
remember like an hour ago when he said he was a sexy man? Like that was great.
That's like when the player is sitting there on the bench going for the high five and nobody gets him. He just high fives himself.
Oh, he just got Josh Harden.
What about? I was like, 'cause I'm obviously fascinated by what's going to happen with Kevin Durant. Atlanta still has capital and movable money. I mean, that's like a somewhat. If I was Kevin Durant, if I'm thinking about him, there's like something attractive about what Atlanta is capable of doing. If I put myself onto that team, having just gotten Murray as well.
Do they have capital?
They still have a lot left over even
players.
after trading. Yeah, I mean, even after that trade, they still have draft capital. And if I was going to put together, it's Herter, Collins picks, right? You know what I mean? Something that starts around there.
Yeah.
It would certainly be. I mean, there's not like we said, there's not a lot of teams out there that can pull this thing off for Kevin Durant, and that offers Brooklyn something back that they actually think has value.
There's rumblings from Phoenix that the Boston Celtics are trying to get Kevin Durant now.
Yeah, Johnny.
Yeah, I don't buy that.
High five yourself.
Look. The Nets have had time to let their assets appreciate from the original framework of the KG Paul Pierce deal in the form of Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum, and now they're ready to recoup those assets by flipping Kevin Durant for one of those players.
But that's
yes or no, John?
But that's a great example, though, John. Right? Like, say even the idea that Boston's interested in Kevin Durant. What would that package even look like? Having just mentioned Atlanta, right? Like, Boston isn't giving up. Obviously, Jason Tatum. They're not giving up anybody. It's going to be around Jaylen Brown, but they don't have a lot else to throw into that.
So it would have to include Jaylen Brown, and I'm not willing to do that. I'm just not willing to do that. And not only would it require Jaylen Brown, you still have about $8 million to make up in that deal, and I don't think Jaylen Brown and Daniel Tice is the package that Brooklyn would be looking for. I think they'd be looking for a little bit more than that. And I just
enticed by that offer.
No. As I explained to you, Adam, when we spoke earlier, I'll repeat it for the whole thing. I wrote this on Boston Sports Journal, but my comparison is basically somebody's giving you vegetables in this deal, and the Celtics have a garden out back that could potentially produce a whole lot more. With 24-year-old Jason Tatum, with 25-year-old Jaylen Brown, having just made the finals, and I know there's no guarantee that you're going to get back, but when you have a proven formula of those two guys, after a finals loss where they learned some real hard lessons, and I think they learned some real hard lessons about themselves, I'm betting on those guys to do more over the longer window that they have. So, they're, like I said, 24 and 25. You can go until you're 32, 33. So that's a 8-year window potentially if both guys want to stick around that long. But I'm betting that they can do in 8 years what KD might be able to do in 2 years with or 3 years with Boston. I get it. I understand the argument for KD. I like the longer term prospects just a little bit more with Tatum and Brown. So I'm just not willing to give that up. I think they can do a lot. I think this can be a special team that's in contention for a while.
All right, we got a kind of a weird one, and then the weirdest news. But this one is Lonnie Walker is signing a $6 million deal to go to the Lakers. So their entire tax mid-level is going to Lonnie Walker to go play for the Lakers. That one's
They're back, baby.
Problem solved.
They're back. They're back.
They're back.
All
Lakers
our troubles
back.
are over, dude.
We got Lonnie Walker. Let's go, guys.
Good to go.
The weird one, though, is that Adrian Wojnarowski at 6:02 Central, so like 2 minutes ago, just said free agent guard Jalen Brunson is armed with a 5-year, $106 million plus Mavericks offer, headed to a meeting with the New York Knicks within the hour. What are we doing? First of all, what are the Mavericks doing here? Because all of us know what the deal is with the Knicks. All of us know exactly what the Knicks are offering them. They're offering him a $104 or $105 million deal over 4 years. And the Mavericks are like, all right, we'll give you $106 million. It's like the Dwight Schrute, like $100 and 1 penny. We'll give you the 106 and 1 penny. Like they just keep coming back.
Is it just to save face with Mavericks fans, or I just wonder?
Because
if I may,
I think it's just a nice gesture by Dallas to be like, here.
It's not a nice gesture. It doesn't make any sense.
No,
Brunson.
I think
like here's a little bit extra money for you when you go to the Knicks.
I think what's happening here is that that tweet said a 5-year offer, right? First off,
It's a 5-year offer.
Right.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
5-year
saying.
one.
It's like
so that's like way less money. That's
way
like way
less.
less annual value.
But they're saying
yeah.
we'll give you a full deal that's worth, we'll give you just that much more
for
money.
one
It's like,
more,
okay,
yeah.
but it's 5 years.
I think what's
So that was
happening
equal
here,
years.
And no state income tax, if I'm not mistaken. You gotta always remember
Yeah,
Texas,
that's
no
true.
state income tax.
Fair.
But
I
if
can
I
speak
may
from
read
experience.
the
The low ball offer always backfires.
Go ahead, Alex.
well, if I may read like the political tea leaves here, I think basically what's happening here, and I've thought this for a while. Woj is definitely getting info right. He's like maybe one of the only guys that does get info right from the Knicks front office. I think what's happening here, Shams got the info from Cuban, which is why he put it out there like the Mavs didn't even get a meeting. Like, let's use this tweet as proof for the tampering allegation. And Chris Haynes got the actual number, and now Woj putting this out there is probably a favor to Leon Rose, being like, no, we'll just say that he's going to a meeting with the Mavericks.
We did have a meeting. We're having
or
a meeting
he had
right
a meeting with the Mavericks or whatever. Yeah,
It already happened. Trust us, it already happened.
I think this is all just water carrying. The Knicks are definitely still signing him, but it's just water carrying for various people, I think, is all that's happening here.
On the Mavs side of it, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, if that's the offer that you're giving him, we knew what this was the whole time. Like, and you're not fooling me with the 105 and 106. Like that big number is the difference when it's 4 years and 5 years. Like, come on.
Maybe it's a
What are you
fake
doing with
offer,
this?
like
What's
the
point?
Heat was a fake meeting. It's
all just fake. Everybody just
fake
knew.
news.
I
Like,
like that. I do like that Dallas is like, we value Brunson at almost the same amount, but with 1 more year of service than what the New York Knicks are willing to give you. Like, for 5 years, yeah, sure, we do that. For 4 years, oh my God, God bless. God
and
bless.
it's not like he's injury prone. It's not like the 1 more
No.
year is like that much better. I mean, come on.
Is the real news of this free agency going to be that Woj is slipping a little bit on getting the stories and getting them
Everybody says
timed
that.
properly?
Everybody says Woj is slipping, and then it just comes back and he just dominates.
We've been
again.
saying Woj is slipping for like 5 years now, it feels like.
When did he sign with ESPN? Wasn't it like 10 years ago at this point?
Yeah, it was a long time ago now.
It was a while. Yeah, he used to.
How
I miss.
what is
I
every
miss-
year of service covering the NBA like that? What does it cost you in real life years? Like, that's not a 1-to-1.
He joined ESPN in 2017.
See, exactly, and we all thought a decade. See that?
I mean,
5 years. There we go. That's
You
the
see
conversion
that?
rate. When you are an NBA journalist and you are a
2 to
newsbreaker,
1.
that's the conversion rate is 1 year equals 2 years.
Plus
I mean,
the
I think-
pandemic adds like a lot of stress to everyone's
I
life.
think the juxtaposition of Woj with Shams, who's like, he just graduated college 2 years ago?
Yesterday?
Right?
Yesterday.
We're still retweeting his like high school lunch tweets.
He was tweeting that sources say Shams is getting his diploma today as he was walking across the stage.
Oh,
Oh boy. Well,
All right.
What-
No, well, let me lob something up here to Adam, Nick,
Okay.
since you had so many breaking news sounders to hammer me over the head with 10 minutes ago. All right, Adam. So you mentioned earlier, right? There's not an incentive right now, and Doug touched on this earlier on Locked On Nets, but there's not an incentive for the Nets to actively tank right now because they don't own their future draft capital.
Yeah.
What if there's a permutation somewhere down the line of a KD trade that involves having KD go to his desired location, have package from said location come back to the Houston Rockets, and then the Rockets actually go back to Brooklyn with some version of their draft picks. So then the Brooklyn Nets do have incentive to actually rebuild and tank and bottom out in a traditional sense. That would make a trade possibly quite a bit easier rather than having to have a, one-to-one trade where both teams have to walk away feeling, hey, like, yeah, teams getting KD, so yeah, they're suddenly title favorites, contenders, whatever. And then the Brooklyn Nets still walk away feeling like they have a, reliable chance to be competitive since they have no reason to actually bottom out and tank. It helps that situation. I think it's at least something worth considering and looking at from a hypothetical standpoint.
Oh, 100%. No, that's why getting multiple teams involved is what matters here. Name a team that's like OKC, who we think they couldn't possibly tank again for a third straight year, right? So if they're going to be better, well, then you start to take that off the table. You want to get to a team that the draft capital you're going to get back is as surefire of a thing that you'll be at the top of the draft. Now, funnily enough, inside of that, it's like, what are the mechanics going on around Kyrie Irving as well? If the season gets underway, is he going to stay away from the team? If they can't accomplish a trade immediately, like the Brooklyn Nets need to get to whatever point it is before the season starts. You can't be carrying this in any form or fashion over, because you actually could be effectively damaging, to your point, Jackson. What if it is the Rockets picks that are the Brooklyn Nets picks? We could be damaging our own assets that we're trying to reacquire in some way. But name the number of teams that are going to be at the bottom of this, that the Nets, outside of acquiring their own picks back, name a team that's going to have that type of assurance that they'll be guaranteed that bad this year and that can get involved facilitating and still get something out of the deal as well. Because what is Houston going to want back being a part of this operation, right? What do they get in return from Team X that's going to sacrifice a player, knowing that these packages are hard to move, right?
Chris, did you just text this to me? Tim Reynolds, to show his continued importance and value to the franchise, the Miami Heat sent a delegation of employees to make a free agency pitch to Udonis Haslam promptly at 6 p.m. tonight, with hopes of luring him back for year 20.
Go!
Let's get.
That's the biggest news, and we didn't even get the sounder for it, Nick. Come on, man.
Who are the Heat sending to Udonis Haslam's house tonight?
Pat Riley, Eric
So
Spoelstra,
amazing.
Jimmy Butler. Jimmy's bringing just lots of
Oh
big
my gosh,
face
where's
coffee.
Wes Goldberg when you need him?
Alonzo Mourning's got to be a part of that delegation, right?
Sure.
Keith Askins heading down there.
Yeah.
All
Tim
the
Boyd's
all
gonna
the
make a
players.
trip.
At
D
what
Wade's
point
gonna
does he
make a
just
trip.
get made a assistant coach at this point? Like,
He isn't.
why are they still doing this?
He likes to wear the warm-ups. He likes to, he's doing his.
The salary is definitely
Hey.
higher, and I respect it, honestly.
Who,
I mean,
who
honestly,
doesn't, who doesn't look good in rip-away shorts?
Who's
Rip-away
gonna
pants?
Who's gonna fight Jimmy Butler if he leaves? Right? Like,
They need that enforcer.
oh my gosh, this is so.
And
that's
it's
so
probably
funny.
it's probably frowned upon for an assistant coach to put hands on a player like that, so they've got to just keep him as an actual player on the roster.
I just love that they're like, we need to do an in-person meeting at 6:00. Like,
we had that part.
Probably
is funny,
he
but
probably has an apartment in FTX arena.
the thing about it though, we talked about this a lot with JJ Barea when he was like kind of in and out of the Mavericks like whole system. Is that it's different when it's a player than when it's a coach. When you become a coach, like what Jared Dudley is for the Mavericks right now, like it's just different. Like you can still kind of relate to players, but you're not there with them. You're not like on the bench with them and all that kind of stuff in warm-ups and could play and all that. So I guess there's just a different feeling, but I don't know.
Could be a
I don't know.
union thing.
It's
Could be a
worked
union
for the
thing,
Heat.
too.
It's worked for the Heat. They've had so much success with him. So
Really quick, rank these lifers: Udonis Haslam, Nick Collison, JJ Barea. Go.
where's Rylan Stiles? He needs to
I know he's not here for it.
Also,
unfortunately.
JJ Barea played for the Wolves, but we don't try to remember.
I mean,
that.
but
he played for the
he's a
Timberwolves.
Mavs lifer at heart. Come on.
UD is one. There's no question. He's like
I was gonna say.
he's
Yeah.
the poster child for like being on one team forever, even after you probably could have retired already.
The dream is to be Udonis Haslam. It's like the backup quarterback argument.
Oh, yeah.
The best position on the team is the backup quarterback. You get all the practice reps. You don't actually have to play. Everyone loves you. Everyone wants you to start over the starter most of the time. It's the ideal role. It's what you want in sports. You want to be Udonis Haslam.
But does he also have to go through like the very notoriously rigorous like heat culture like training sessions as well?
He's still got to run up the
Like,
sandhills.
yeah, he still has to do all of that. Like, honestly, like that sounds like a lot of work, even though the money's good. Like, again,
he's about that life though. He's doing that in his spare time.
That's just,
Chris Manning,
truly built different.
Chris, do you pay Planet Fitness to go work out, or do you get paid to go work out with the heat? Right? Like,
look, I am not built like that, man. I am not built to run up some sandhills when I'm.
Didn't we just find out at the
old.
beginning of the season heat culture is just like photo and angles? Like that's. Anybody remember that thread? That was the greatest thing that I've ever seen in my life. Oh,
all angles and lighting. That's a.
Oh, here we go.
Lighting.
We still got Adam Armbrecht in here. Restricted free agent Nick Claxton agreed to a 2-year, $20 million deal to return to the Nets. Nick Claxton going back to the Nets, Adam.
Well, you know what? He could have gone all the way up to the 4-year. And I think this, John's gone. Talked about this earlier, though, the landscape of the NBA. And this is Claxton probably. He's only 23 years old still. He's been in the league forever. He's only played just over 90 games. But this is him probably pushing the pause button, too. And to kind of the way talked about Patty Mills, even it's just keep him on the books, and maybe there's an opportunity down the line here. So it's good for Claxton, though, man. I hope he sticks around.
That to me feels like another tradable kind of deal that they could do.
By the way, it's happening. Like the Brooklyn Nets are doing it. It's the rebuild. The rebuild is happening before the trades get made with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. They're already doing things that you would if you were a team ready to reshape.
That's wild. Philip, we haven't talked about the Magic. Are the Magic doing anything in free agency? What are the thoughts?
We apparently re-signed Mo Bamba to a 2-year, $21 million contract. There we go.
What jersey number?
11.
He is changing.
Yeah, they announced that shortly after they drafted Banchero, and it was like, okay, that feels like you're pushing him out the door. But
yes,
yeah, no, it sounds like the Magic misdirected everyone again by not tendering him a qualifying offer because they probably already had this deal agreed to at 6 p.m. After 6 p.m. Wink, wink. But no, the Magic needed a backup center, so they're just kind of going back to the well. I thought Mo had a solid year. Obviously, I think there's still a lot of improvement. I don't think he's the answer, but they're going to play him probably behind Wendell Carter, start Paolo Banchero, and see where that takes him. I think for a backup center that you could do a whole lot worse. I won't lie. I thought Isaiah Hartenstein probably would have been a better option for what the Magic are trying to do, but it would have been very hard for the Magic to outcompete a playoff-capable team like the Knicks or a more veteran team like the Knicks in free agency. And I think that's kind of how it's going to be for Orlando the rest of the offseason. I would say I think Orlando is going to be a team that is potentially the third team in the Durant deal. I'd bet that's what Orlando's angling to be with the cap room that they still have, because they have, with the Bamba, they can sign with bird rights, but they'll have, $18, $19 million of free space to use if anyone wants to use it. So whether it's whatever Atlanta ends up doing with John Collins or whatever Brooklyn ends up doing with Durant, I would say Orlando is probably going to be a third team or a team that guys salary dump to get what they need.
What's the starting backcourt for the Magic? I do this thing every year. I don't know if you guys do this, where I try to figure out what the depth chart is for each team and just go through it. And I got to the Magic and I was like, I don't know what happens here.
Yeah, it's going to be Markelle Fultz as the starting point guard. I don't think there's a doubt about that. The way he finished the season was fantastic. The team was just better when he was out there. Just the whole flow and energy of the team was just so much better, especially when he did get to play with the starters. So I would put Markelle Fultz as the starting point guard in very, very deep pencil. I don't know if it would be pen yet, but it's a very hard
pen. You guys remember erasable pen?
Erasable pen. Yeah, exactly. The shooting guard spot I think is really up in the air. I think they want it to be Jalen Suggs, but Suggs obviously struggled a lot last year, and I think kind of the next need that the Magic have this offseason, they got to find another wing somewhere, and they got to find shooting. I think Orlando will try and re-sign Gary Harris. I don't know if he'll take that. I think he wants to go to a winning situation. And I can't blame him for that at this stage of his career. But Orlando needs shooting really badly. Jalen Suggs was a 29% through 28% 3-point shooter last year. Markelle Fultz is only going to take threes when he's really comfortable taking them, which is, he knows that's not what he's out there to do. So I think Orlando will be hunting for a guy that can maybe push Jalen a little bit for that starting 2-guard spot, but ultimately I think Orlando wants to be there. So, I think there's still some questions to answer for Orlando this offseason.
I want Jalen Suggs to be there too. I just want him to be good. I thought for sure he was going to step up, but we'll see.
He's a really good defender. He's, I've been telling people after this year, maybe we lower expectations a little bit, but if he turns out to be Marcus Smart, I'll take that. It took Marcus Smart a while to figure out how to be good offensively.
That's true. Yeah, it takes a while for some of those guys. You have the one main skill that starts with you, and then you can bring in some other stuff and develop your game as it goes. And it's only been 1 year for him, so we'll see.
It's only been 1 2. Let's not forget that. He missed a ton of time with hand injury. He's a football player, so he's just throwing his body around. It felt like he was getting up hobbled every game, and we're just like, dude, just chill out. We get it. But he had ankle surgery early in the offseason, so he's still just kind of getting himself back on the court recently is what I've heard. So it's definitely a big question there at the 2-guard spot for Orlando.
I don't know if this is worth a thing, but I might as well just do it because we haven't done it in a little while. According to Adrian Wojnarowski, James Harden and the Sixers are meeting on the weekend to negotiate his new deal.
Can I just say,
can we talk about the Sixers for a minute?
The fact that James Harden has opted out specifically to help the team get better, to be able to sign other guys, to get PJ Tucker. Nobody would have thought that James Harden was about this 3 months ago. Everything juxtaposed to what's going on in Brooklyn. I'm impressed by James Harden and the choices he's making.
Now, see, and here's the problem. Look, James Harden is one of the most polarizing presences across the entire NBA, right? I've sat here, I cover this guy in Houston for the better part of the last decade. He is a guy that the NBA I guess landscape loves to just hate, and I really he garnered this negative media image because of the foul baiting, the style of play, all of that, right? And whether or not that's your cup of tea or not, sure, that's a different argument. But as far as the actual desire to want to win, he's had a few moments where he's kind of shrunk in some big moments, namely the Game 6 against the San Antonio Spurs. He's also delivered in huge moments against the Dynasty era Warriors where, he didn't pull out a win against four future Hall of Famers. So, that's tough. Lost his running mate and Chris Paul, all of that. But this idea that James Harden somehow isn't about winning or doesn't have this mentality that he wants to win at all costs. James Harden has a pretty solid work ethic. In Houston, he constantly was working out before and after games, doing all this stuff. The guy just likes to go to strip clubs and get buckets. That's what he does. And for some reason, that's garnered him a bit of a negative reputation. But
sometimes those buckets are on the court, and sometimes those buckets are full of alcohol.
Well, and also,
whose opinion are we going to trust? A guy who covered him for multiple seasons and was around him day in and day out, or the guy that had him on his team for a year?
Look, also he did go to enough strip clubs in Houston where he got a banner put up for him. That's
dedication. I mean, that's right. That's legend.
I'm just
stats.
saying. Yeah. That's
but
a lot of time.
That's a lot of time.
But that's how focused he is in all that he does.
I like your the head tap. You're
gotta be here.
Yeah, you're right up there.
You gotta come at you there.
Good.
Also, when's the last time he played for the Houston Rockets?
It was less than 2 years ago.
It was 18 months ago, Titanic right? Lady meme.
January 12th, 2021. So it was a year and a half ago.
Telling you guys, life comes at you fast,
18
man.
Months.
Getting old.
Comes at you fast.
Did he play for the Houston Rockets sooner than Ben Simmons last played for the Philadelphia 76ers?
Ooh, that's probably true. Oh. Okay, I gotta go look it up. All right, I'll be back.
No, because Simmons played in the playoffs that year of 2021, right?
Doesn't matter.
Simmons played in June and Harden played in January.
What about the entire panel was oohing and awing after that comment.
And that's what I did it for. I did it for the lulz.
All right,
what about since the last time Udonis Haslam was on the court? No.
When he tried to smack Jimmy Butler.
Yeah,
right.
We all saw that on the court.
Dwight Howard still hasn't recovered from that moment.
With James Harden, though, there was that Shams tweet. He said, Harden's sole focus, win a title in Philadelphia next season. Harden returned to his workout and on-court regimen sooner than usual this offseason, pouring his full focus on the 2022-23 championship run. I read that, and honestly, it changed where I thought the Sixers would be in my mind when I like going into the season, like who I thought would be the champions. I like didn't even consider them as a champion contender, and I read that and I was like, oh, maybe I should consider them. And then I thought for a second, wait, why am I thinking that? Why did that change my opinion on whether I think the Sixers are a title contender or not? Did anybody else have the same thing?
Well, would it change your mind if he also went vegan?
Oh,
Right?
Hold on now.
If
We worked
James
for
Harden
Chris
goes
Paul.
plant-based, it changes the whole
Yeah.
calculus. But that is actually the parallel that we should draw from this, right? Is Chris
Mashed
Paul was
LeBron,
dealing with
untucked Kyrie, vegan.
Are there vegan? Are there
Harden.
vegan? Are there vegan buffets at strip clubs in Philadelphia? That's the
I
real
highly
That's the
doubt
real
those
question.
exist.
Yeah.
Highly doubt it.
Isn't
Look
a
at the
vegan
tofu
buffet just like a
selection.
Can you
garden?
get a vegan Philly cheesesteak?
You get some like impossible. You get some like impossible meat. Like you get some like those plant-based chicken nuggets. Like you got some options out there.
James Harden sometimes looks like an impossible meat with his physical shape. But please continue.
Wow.
I believe you were saying something.
What do we think about the Sixers as a title contender, though? If James Harden comes back, and maybe he's not fully vegan, but maybe he like went Impossible
Health.
Burger on us.
Health.
Maybe
That-
maybe
that's
he goes
right.
like paleo or keto or something, right?
Something
Like,
close.
But
Just built bars.
Once upon a
Just
time,
Bill
wasn't it?
Barnes.
Once upon a time, when Brooklyn deferred the pick from Philadelphia, I think the reason why they chose to do that was as good as Philly, or as good as Embiid was, and then obviously Harden struggled a little bit once he came over in that trade. It had some up and downs, but it was, hey, they're only one injury away from a guy who's struggled to be healthy consistently to this pick maybe being more valuable next year. So I mean, if they're healthy, yeah. I mean, who are you going to put them behind, really, or at least look at and say toe to toe the same way we looked at Milwaukee before Middleton had his injury, right? So they're 100% in the mix.
with the pieces that they
Good-
have,
good comment,
and
Adam.
there it is. with the pieces that they have, right? Reassembling, pardon me, reassembling the 2018-2019, Philadelphia Rockets, if you will, with adding PJ Tucker, Daniel House Jr., Tyrese Maxey taking another step, having an offseason, working with James Harden. If Harden comes back and is like 80% of what he gave to Houston during those like actual like MVP seasons, then I think you got to look at Philly as like a lock to be one of the top 4 teams out east and be legitimately in the mix. If they can get another MVP caliber season from Joel Embiid, then you have to look at them as legitimate favorites to kind of be in contention for one of those top seeds with like the Boston Celtics, with the Milwaukee Bucks. And I think that's the thing where you look at James Harden and you think, okay, Chris Paul did it, right? Had the down year, had the hamstring injury, came back, had the really disappointing 2018-2019 season, then had the incredible bounce back year in OKC the following year. James Harden realizes this past season that was a down year for him, right? So now he knows that he has to really channel and work harder than he probably ever has before in an offseason to prepare his body for the grind of the NBA regular season. And if he does that, and if he puts in the work that he needs to, I mean, that could be a really scary team next season.
What about Tobias Harris? Like, what
about Tobias Harris?
Well, I mean, it's like, what is, I don't know, like, what is he now that this team seems like, on the one hand, with James Harden and everybody healthy, then he can be required to serve a much more niche role. I don't know. The contract's enormous. He's always been an underachiever by and large. Like, it just feels like now that you're turning the tides and trying to turn this corner in Philadelphia, it seems like now you're going to ask a really big question about a player that you need to be able, like, he needs to be counted on for whatever his role is going to be here. I find it fascinating if Philadelphia will try to add 4 quarters for $1 of that money and maybe just supplement some things on that roster to make them deeper, and secure some of that injury risk that they may have.
He's 2022 Ryan Anderson is what he is.
That's a shame.
It is. And the Sixers are going to try and trade him all, and nobody wants him is the problem.
Yeah.
And they're stuck with that money, and they want some level of contribution. They'd be happy getting probably even 50 cents on the dollar for what he's actually worth, just so that you can have a legitimate, reliable, like, rotation player thrown in there.
Yeah.
Any moves today that changed the needle for anybody? Jalen Brunson isn't he like the best player that has changed teams so far?
I think so.
I would say so. Yeah,
Kevin Durant requesting a trade.
yeah.
Well, he hasn't moved yet. We'll see.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. I mean, I don't know how to feel
TBD,
about,
right? I guess depending on what happens.
Yeah.
Whoa,
With
Trevel
Kevin
and
Durant, right?
Queen changed from the RGV Vipers to the Philadelphia 76ers. How dare you? That is a needle mover, okay?
Yeah, I don't know if the move really moves the needle for the Knicks if he is the best player to sign so far. Like I think he moves the needle from hopefully they won't be a play-in team to hopefully now or like adjust outside the play-in team and now can reinsert themselves back in the playoff picture. But I don't think they're done yet with making that making that leap yet. Like I don't think this turns them into like a top 4 seed or something overnight. So hopefully they'll be back in the like 6 seed picture, which I guess is definitely improvement. So yeah,
one of the
I like
areas one of the areas we didn't mention when looking at the Jalen Brunson situation earlier, talking about kind of the pros and cons about, him joining the Knicks, right, is he had the benefit, right, of playing off of one of the top 5 players in the NBA in Luka Doncic, right? How much does that actually translate to the Knicks? I know, earlier, Nick, you mentioned the idea of like, okay, he's going to have the ball in his hands more with New York, right? He's going to be kind of the guy playing off of these other guys in New York a little bit more than he was in Dallas. But how much benefit did Brunson actually get being kind of second fiddle to Luka and having defenses that are so keyed in on him constantly, where he was able to kind of thrive in that secondary role? Whereas now you're going to have teams that are like nightly probably game planning for him directly, as a New York Knick.
Yeah, that matters a lot. But I also think that at the beginning of the Mavericks season, their starters were like all across the board net negatives, like every single one of them. And Jalen Brunson was leading a unit off of the bench that was all positive. Like they were only winning games because of their bench and because of Jalen Brunson, and he was the one leading the charge there. And so it was good to see him, and that's where we first started to see his like rise this season. And so then they obviously won games in the playoffs without Luka Doncic, and Jalen Brunson was the main guy. So they beat the Utah Jazz 2 times without Luka Doncic. And so I don't think it means a ton. Like maybe over the course of an entire season, it'll mean a lot to have, a better defender on Jalen Brunson and all that. But you weigh the two, right? Whether it's a better defender on him or more usage, right? Like if those two can weigh out and he can stay still pretty efficient, then it's going to be a good move for the Knicks, right? Like that's just what it's going to come down to. And I don't think he's done growing, right? We just saw him like take this big step this past season. What makes you think he can't take another one just because he's 6'1"? Like, okay.
Yeah, it was so funny hearing you say about the bench thing too, because it's literally like the Emmanuel Quickley story with the Knicks is, he like leads these bench units that him and Obi like lead the bench, and the bench was like vastly outscoring the starters for the first part of the season when they were doing that horrendous Kemba, Evan, RJ, Julius, and Mitch starting lineup that was like the worst starting lineup almost in NBA history. Via like net rating and a couple other metrics and everything. So yeah, I think he'll slot in well. I think he'll work well with either Evan and RJ or with Quickley and RJ, which is kind of the nice thing because he's not exactly going to have a Luka with him anymore that can handle like, 70% of the ball handling or whatever the split was in Dallas with him there. But, if Brunson is like the lead guard and is doing like 50% of the ball handling, I think that's tenable. Like even if the Knicks get rid of Randall, I think the plan would be to have like Quickley, Brunson, and RJ sort of like split up the ball handling because all of them have kind of cut their teeth as guys that had to be off-ball players, which is really valuable. Like I've been saying this for years about RJ, and now I'm saying it about Quickley too. Like despite the fact that maybe at their best, they're going to be guys that develop with the ball in their hands, they had to sort of cut their teeth for the first couple of years being off-ball guys. Like RJ had to learn to be a great spot-up three-point shooter and, how to cut and like just make quick decisions off of quick screens on the outside where he gets just like a quick handoff on the outside or something like that. So he's developed those skills, Quickly spent most of his rookie year playing alongside Derrick Rose, where Rose was bringing the ball down the floor most of the time. And Quickly would be sort of the secondary option or a spot-up threat. So he's really learned how to do that, plus playing some point guard down the stretch of this season. And Brunson has definitely done that too. Like he was great off ball, playing off of Luka, or good with the ball in his hands as well. So I'm pretty excited for that particular trio of guys to play together. I think they're going to work really well together.
I got some news. It's not big. It's small in many ways.
Did Haslam sign?
The Denver Nuggets are not the Denver Nuggets are not extending a qualifying offer to Facu Campazzo. The Campazzo era in Denver is over.
If you're not extending the qualifying offer, well then
that's it. All right, let's finish here talking about Kevin Durant. What's your prediction? We'll just go around the room. What's your prediction with Kevin Durant? He does, it's been said that he's a no trade clause in his contract. I'm not sure if that's 100%, but that he will have some say in this. He wants to go to the Suns. He wants to figure out a way to get himself to the Suns, apparently play with Chris Paul. We'll see what happens. What's your gut reaction on Kevin Durant?
He's going to find his way to Phoenix.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's not like the sexy or exciting take. I just think that's the one that makes the most sense, right? Star players generally, it feels like they're going to get what they want in today's NBA. And if Kevin Durant's playing hardball with the Brooklyn Nets and he basically says, send me to Phoenix. If you try to send me anywhere else, I'm just going to refuse to play for them, or I'm going to cause more drama or whatever. What organization wants to touch that situation with a 10-foot pole? So at that point, and Phoenix, I think, has the most attractive offer. If you can convince DeAndre Ayton to want to opt in or not opt in, but, agree to a sign and trade and go play for the Brooklyn Nets, that's the most attractive offer. Some version, some, permutation of Ayton and Cam Johnson and 3 or 4 first-round draft picks for the next however many years. That's probably the best deal on the table at this point for Kevin Durant and for the Nets to remain competitive.
It's such a complicated deal, though. That's not a deal that's happening today. If you get if Durant is going to get to Phoenix, and if Brooklyn's just yeah, let's just do it, and sure, he can. I don't think he has that power though to just say I'm going to sulk, because the other team can just stop paying him, and he's not going to waste the last 3 years. You can say, hey, we'll play hardball. A team trades for Durant, and he's like, I don't really want to be here. They'll say, all right, well, we're not going to pay you if you don't show up. There's got to be some middle ground. There has to be some middle ground. But regardless, forget that. If you're going to get to Phoenix, there are CBA issues that make this difficult that I don't think people quite understand, and it's complicated. But there's the issue of base year compensation. And base year compensation in a sign and trade, essentially, in a nutshell, will make whatever the number is for DeAndre Ayton, it'll count half of that for Phoenix in a salary matching situation, while counting as the whole number for Brooklyn in a salary matching situation. So that makes what you take back and what goes out, all of that stuff, it makes it very complicated. So that's something that's going to take some time to work through. You've got to work through that stuff. Also, the Nets are going to be hard capped if they take back Ayton in a sign and trade. So they have to make sure that they're under the known as the apron, but the hard cap line, $6 million above the luxury tax. They got to make sure that they're far enough underneath that to make that happen. So if they're going to accommodate Durant, then you have to take those things into account and probably take a third team, maybe even a fourth team into this, so the right numbers can go out and the right numbers can go in to satisfy all of these crazy CBA things. So if we are saying that we think Durant is going to go to Phoenix, and I'm going to lean that way too, because that's generally how the NBA works, it's something that we have to understand. People watching have to understand. This is not something that's going to be done tomorrow. This is going to take some time.
And we will just keep talking about it over and over again on Locked On NBA.
Give us that content.
We will. Anybody else think he's going to go somewhere else besides the Suns?
I think there's a decent chance that what ends up happening is that it ends up almost like who was it recently? I think it was with Harden, although he ultimately got where he wanted to go. But when things were kind of dragging, they were like, give us a list, dude. Come on. Don't just say one team and make us figure that out. Give us a list so we can at least talk to a couple teams. I think that'll happen after a week or two with Durant. And then eventually he'll give them a list. And if they decide to send him to Phoenix, I wouldn't be surprised if Ayton goes to a third team, where essentially they say, all right, whatever team you want to go to, Ayton, we'll work it out with them, because now we need to make all this salary move around anyway. I'm sure there are a lot of teams that would have interest in Ayton. So then they can take him and send other assets to the Nets or whatever to make up for that. It's going to be interesting to see what the Nets motivations are in this trade, though. Like, are they going to try to max out the amount of picks they get back to try to make up for the fact that they have like no first round picks for like the rest of this decade? Or are they going to, try to keep the window open a little bit with Ben Simmons and see what they got and try to get enough competitive players that they can maybe compete for the playoffs in the East, which we saw this past year is like way more open than it has been in recent years. So I don't know. It'll be an interesting situation to see how they decide to tackle it. But I would not be surprised if eventually it drags on a bit. Durant gives them a list that allows them to put together a package that they like better by pitting a couple teams against each other, even if they ultimately send him to Phoenix. But maybe there'll be some surprise team that he goes to too.
New York Daily News. I can't get through this one. Christian Winfield has a story about Donovan Mitchell right now. He said, unrelated to the Nets, the Heat are a more likely landing spot for Donovan Mitchell and have furnished a trade offer to the Jazz. New York City hip hop legend Fat Joe told Chris that Mitchell's dream is to play for Miami and not for his hometown Knicks.
Cool.
Fat Joe's giving us the sources here.
Fat Joe is like a huge Knicks fan too. What the hell is he doing, man?
He's
don't
telling
be
the
leaking
truth.
this shit.
You think maybe he's telling the truth that he would rather play in Miami than the Knicks?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know why Fat Joe would just like say that, I guess. Like, what would be his reasoning to throw that? Unless he wants it to look like a real like comeback kid story when the Knicks trade for him. Like, no, I got you. He doesn't want to play for Miami. Maybe this is another Miami, like, screw you Miami move.
Wow.
Like, now Fat Joe's in on it. The Knicks are just clowning the Heat left and right today, I guess. I don't know.
Just saw the joke made. I was just going to make this joke, and it was in the comments. The Dave Chappelle thing about the Ja Rule. There's Ja Rule showing up on CNN. Does somebody go find out what Ja Rule thinks? What this is.
Oh, that was Ross Jackson from Locked On.
Was it Ross? There you go. Damn.
I got one.
Who got
Juan Toscano-Anderson is signing a deal with the Los Angeles Lakers. Ooh. The Lakers now, Lonnie Walker on their tax mid-level, Troy Brown Jr., and Juan Toscano-Anderson getting some wings.
Loading back up.
Trying to recoup load back up.
That's NBA world champion Juan Toscano-Anderson to you.
Oh, here we go.
El Campeon.
Free agent center JaVale McGee has reached an agreement with the Dallas Mavericks. Cool.
Legend.
Cool. They have Christian Wood. They have Dwight Powell. I think that they may have another move for one of those guys, but it'll be interesting because I don't think they run into the season with JaVale McGee, Dwight Powell, and Christian Wood, because if they do, then that means that they could possibly start Dwight Powell and Christian Wood together, and I just don't see that as a good option for the Mavericks. But we'll see. They've needed a rim protector. Nico Harrison after the season at exit interview said we need to get a better rim protector. We need to bring somebody in. They weren't going to get somebody. They weren't going to get a Mitchell Robinson level guy because they just didn't have enough money to get somebody like that, and so they get like the best bench one, I guess, that you could get in JaVale McGee. So here they are, the Dallas Mavericks. Not an exciting day for the Dallas Mavericks, though.
Pretty exciting in some ways. Did they have a meeting or didn't they?
It is exciting in one way. Slovenia dominated Croatia today in FIBA. Luka Doncic just put it to them. And potential future former Maverick Goran Dragic was absolutely amazing in that game.
As he always is for Slovenia.
As he always is. All right.
Did the Lakers only sign clutch clients?
That's what I was going to say. Is that Lonnie Walker is clutch, and he got more money than people thought he was going to.
Troy Brown, Juan Toscano-Anderson.
He's clutch too.
Yeah. All of these guys are clutch. Shockingly, the Lakers are filling out their roster with clutch players.
There it is. Any other deals you guys see here that we missed?
I don't think so.
I think we covered it.
I got nothing over here.
I think we hit them all with them. Guys, thank you all for hanging out with us. It's Locked On NBA. You can find every single team covered 5 days a week on all of our podcasts. Also on YouTube as well. Go check it out. Guys, thanks so much for joining us on Locked On NBA.